takes off with a sudden portal ripping open into a demonic dimension. It turned out to be a carefully planned raid meant to wipe a dungeon clean. Away from the epicenter, a small group of guys gathered, quietly discussing something serious. One of them voiced concern about the unusually massive number of people joining the raid. His partner reminded him that plenty of famous clans were involved in this operation. 5 years ago, after Judgment Day, millions of people awakened with unique powers. At that moment, another man approached the guy sitting nearby, tapping his back to get noticed. Turning around, he saw a stranger who simply wanted to meet the members of his group. The unfamiliar youth tried to start a conversation, venting about how rough raids were for a newbie. The guy on the rock was clearly shaken that someone dared to approach and talk to him. Suddenly, a call rang out from a nearby group, pulling the youth's attention as he rushed over. As he got closer, he caught a whisper warning him that the guy he talked to was the infamous Joe. The youth went pale after realizing who he had spoken with and nervously glanced at the hero. Their eyes met, triggering a wave of fear in the rookie. Joe himself acted like he was fully focused on mission prep. The hero opened the window of fate, a book listing all his abilities. His gaze stopped bitterly on the skill called Theft of Fate. His inner thoughts spiraled into regret over a past incident when a random activation wiped out a team. The Fate rank system had 5 tiers, with Divine at the very top, ruling the hierarchy. Below it came Dragon, Human, Demonic, and Insectoid, each split into 3 classes. Joe stood at the lowest rank of the system. Killing another awakened was unthinkable for the hero, let alone wiping out a whole group. Joe knew someone like him could never raise a hand against another person. Still, no one wanted to believe in his innocence. Suddenly, a lightly built girl approached him, strangely unafraid of the hero. She seemed familiar with him and asked whether he would join the upcoming tournament. Beside her stood a tall guy who also showed zero fear while talking to the hero. Joe suddenly declined participation, blaming exhaustion. Bomb insisted he should still join since they were one team. She suggested he was scared of the rumors spreading through the squads. Joe dodged the topic, reminding her of the age gap between them. The girl refused to back down, insisting his strength would be crucial in the coming raid. Their exchange was abruptly interrupted by a blonde-haired guy. The newcomer, clearly from their clan, told everyone to prepare for the raid. Joe left reluctantly, promising to think about showing up. The pair walked away, leaving the guys alone. Sam voiced his worries to Joe, feeling that this raid was not as simple as it looked. The hero reassured him, saying nothing would threaten him while providing rear support. Suddenly, the mission start was announced to all participants. The entire group moved closer to the portal, aiming to enter first. Joe stepped into the portal as well, finally choosing to join the raid. The moment they entered, monsters launched an attack without giving them time to adjust. Allied fighters instantly took defensive positions, veterans of countless battles. After some time, the enemy forces began to weaken. Suddenly, a massive demon charged the Allied troops, ignoring every single attack. Under the giant's pressure, monsters started surrounding the heroes. The odds of victory tipped heavily against them. The underground air felt thick, slowing recovery and making resistance harder. Joe, consumed by battle, failed to notice an enemy creeping up behind him. A brutal strike knocked the careless hero off his feet. The crowd spotted an easy target and rushed the helpless guy without hesitation. The unlucky fighter realized his time was up, closed his eyes, and flashed through his short life. Suddenly, a burst of green light exploded above him. It was May, the leader of his clan, arriving just in time to save him. Joe wanted to thank her, but lost in thought, she only gave a silent smile. Suddenly, the raid was stunned by the thunder of rocks shattering everywhere. A boss-level enemy appeared way too early, catching the heroes completely off guard. The beast tore the air with a terrifying roar that echoed for miles. The colossal giant froze for a moment, sizing up those it was about to fight. Out of nowhere, The monster reared back after being hit by a massive blow. The crowd looked around in confusion, the fight ending before it even began. Where the boss stood moments ago, an unfamiliar girl now remained. Joe, lost among the people, stared in shock, unable to grasp what was happening. Suddenly, the girl who killed the boss turned her attacks on the humans. She declared she wanted Joe and would stop only after the crowd handed him over. Joe could not believe what was unfolding. He recognized her as a legendary hunter of the Phantom rank. Yet he could not understand why someone that powerful wanted him. Watching from above, panic flooded his mind as he weighed his options. He gathered his resolve to surrender, but green light suddenly stopped him. May signaled for him to stay put. She seemed ready to step into battle herself. Facing the stranger, May made it clear she would not give Joe up freely. The woman ignored her words, repeating she did not want slaughter, only Joe. The killing would end only after she got what she wanted. Joe panicked, thinking that stepping out alone could save his friends. Below, epic chaos unfolded at full scale. A deadly duel erupted between the two women, and May refused to yield Joe. A brutal strike sent May crashing into a wall that barely softened the blow. The killer raised her blade for the final strike. Sam appeared behind her, trying to help, but was instantly noticed. Steve joined in as well, yet his attack also failed. Watching his team get crushed, Joe finally forced his way toward the arena. In the next instant, he landed on the ground. Around him lay only dozens of corpses. The stranger slowly walked toward the fallen man. Joe watched in despair, seeing the cost of his hesitation. Suddenly, green light flooded the arena again as tree-like vines dragged the killer upward. Despite severe wounds, May rejoined the fight. This time, it seemed fatal as she took a devastating wound to the heart. Seeing this outcome, Joe received a prompt to use his fate theft ability. Without hesitation, he chose full assimilation as sapphire light filled the space. His aura detonated in cascading surges, devouring fallen remnants and forming blue lightning patterns. He realized too late that his level was too low to control such power. Abilities activated chaotically, leaving him with zero control. Yet the constant flood of power kept granting him new abilities. Amid the chaos, May's Clover Method ability stood out. As the enemy blade froze above him, the system announced fate absorption complete. By pure reflex, Joe parried, carving a deep scratch across her cheek. Shock filled the stranger's eyes as she faced someone who could resist her power. She leapt back to a safe distance and locked into a defensive stance, eyes sharp and body coiled. Rage flooded Joe, every cell screaming for revenge over his fallen allies. Activating Swordmaster and Hawkeye, he synced combat instincts with razor-sharp perception. Boosting his reflexes even further, he launched chains of lightning-fast strikes from every angle. The stranger barely kept up, her shields cracking under the pressure of layered attacks. Joe's speed hit critical levels, his body blinking around her through spatial tears. Luring her into a trap, he fired a focused beam of raw destruction. But she left a gap on purpose, faking exhaustion to bait a final blow. At the last second, she countered with crystallized energy straight into Joe's chest. Joe crashed to the ground, barely conscious as clashing abilities tore his body apart. The girl raised her rapier, ready to finish it. Crystal slammed into Joe, hurling him aside as she prepared the killing strike. Enduring insane pain, Joe ripped a crystal from his leg. In one smooth motion, he twisted his body and spun back in. She blocked easily, then attacked harder, unable to grasp where Joe's strength came from. Distracted, she failed to notice Joe slipping behind her again. This time he was closer, a crystal in hand, driving it straight into her throat. The battle ended abruptly, victory falling to the hero. Joe felt relief as he avenged his friends by destroying such a foe. Healing was among his abilities, yet he refused to use it. Lying in the ruins, he recalled childhood and a fortune teller predicting loneliness and failure. Her words prove cruelly accurate, every ally meeting a grim end. A sudden insight made him open the window of fate, spotting the regression icon among stolen powers. Gathering his last strength, Joe activated it as reality split into layered timelines. He awoke in a familiar white room, his body free of any wounds. The door creaked open as a man entered with a girl Joe recognized. Hiding behind a book, Joe held back a smile, now holding the key to change fate. The man explained it was their first date, here to test compatibility. The girl barely looked at her companion, lost in her own thoughts. Joe watched her quietly from behind the book, avoiding attention. He had returned, and this future could not be allowed to repeat. Joe asked them to write their names and birthdays on a sheet of paper. The pair filled it out carefully, focused on the task. Joe recalled her words about dating a strange guy, realizing this must be him. He took the papers and studied them closely. The horoscope showed the man as solid metal, unyielding gold. The woman appeared as solid wood, forming a sharp contrast. This pattern was known as metal-cutting wood. Their compatibility was disastrous. The axe destined to fell the tree. The man froze in horror, the girl shaken and unsure how to react. She quietly suggested there was no way out. Enraged, the man jumped up, demanding Joe's manager. Archie replied that the manager was in the lobby. The man urged the girl to leave, calling Joe untrustworthy, but she wanted to hear more of her fate. This only fueled his anger, his face twisting with rage. The girl calmly told him she no longer wanted to see him. Furious, he stormed out, shouting for her never to look for him. She watched him go in silence, showing no emotion. She praised Joe and asked to learn more about her destiny. Suddenly, Joe felt something strange, as if the air around him thickened. Blue light floods the room, and it feels like the girl senses it too. A blond guy in a leather coat orders everyone to prep for immediate movement. For some reason, abilities begin recalculating based on each person's fate. A sharp ringing fills Joe's ears, wrecking his balance and sense of direction. He snaps out of it when the girl yanks him under a table. Joe remembers that in his past life, she saved him like this more than once. The question hits hard. Can he change anything in this life? Suddenly, the aura settles and the tension drains from the room. They have arrived at the very judgment day when abilities are assigned. Joe steps into the corridor, scanning his surroundings. The girl, confused and panicking, rushes after him. Joe searches while moving, his actions fast and precise. He barely slips an item into his pocket before the girl catches up. She grabs his hand and pulls him along, trying to evacuate. They move down the hallway like that, the girl leading and Joe following. A scream filled with terror suddenly echoes through the corridor. A stranger bursts around the corner, yelling for everyone to run as monsters appear from nowhere. One of them catches him instantly, biting into his leg. The girl lunges to help, but Joe is faster, drawing a knife. With one clean strike, he kills the monster and saves the stranger. Joe recalls the day he first awakened his power and realizes the monsters truly have arrived. He charges the remaining group, urging survivors to reach shelter. Fighting non-stop, Joe wipes out every monster in the area. A distant cry for help suddenly reaches his ears. He sprints toward it, warning people to find cover as fast as possible. Then he freezes in shock at what he sees. The girl he just escaped with is killing monsters using a gas cylinder. Standing tall, she shows real confidence, proud she took one down. Joe gives an awkward smile, amused at a dragon slayer being happy over something so small. He signals everyone to move down the reinforced staircase to safety. People rush past, desperate to hide. Joe collects spirit pearls dropped by the monsters. Even low-rank ones appear in higher numbers than expected. He notices the girl stayed behind instead of leaving. Slipping the pearls into his pocket, he wonders why she stayed. She is afraid to leave him alone, feeling responsible for him. Joe is surprised by her sense of duty, not expecting this from her. He decides to tell her something important, realizing she deserves trust. He starts carefully, choosing his words. The girl feels uneasy, sensing this conversation will not be simple. Her rank is third-tier dragon. Her attribute is wood, and her ability is called Cloverleaf Method as a data screen flashes before her. She is stunned, having never seen anything like this. Joe reminds her of the strange incident not long ago when people suddenly gained powers. She admits she feels stronger than ever before. Joe suggests heading downstairs to find a safer place. On the way, she asks what Joe's fate is. He refuses to say for now, worried someone might be listening. His fate window seems unchanged from 5 years ago, and the ability stolen before regression may be gone. But his karma has climbed to an absurd level. If he wants to change the future, he can use his power, but gaining more mana right now would be dangerous. Karma is earned through major crimes like killing, heavy acts that stain the soul. Too much karma turns a person into an outcast from society. Everyone who reached that state ended up suffering. Suddenly, the girl stops the hero, sensing someone ahead. A figure appears in the corridor, and the girl calls out. It turns out not to be a person but May, and the pair rush to help her. A worm crawls out behind the mummy, and Joe wipes it out in one strike. Lucky there was only one. The girl wonders if someone living could still be inside the mummy. To check, the hero activates his fate-stealing ability. Only one body is detected, meaning the mummy is dead, though it had a fire control skill that might have saved it. Joe decides to claim that ability for himself. Suddenly, the girl spots someone else in the distance. A kid with a broom is fighting worms, taking them down one after another with ease. He notices the pair approaching him. He asks if they are the ones he should team up with. Without waiting, he introduces himself as Mike. Joe gives his name back, noting to himself that they were not the only ones starting their path here. Mike is happy to meet them and hints that now something should begin soon. The girl is surprised by what exactly is supposed to start. Mike is confused in return, assuming all events follow a fixed scenario. Joe scans Mike's abilities and sees he will one day lead one of the 5 great clans. That alone proves he had no trouble awakening. Mike explains that by the story flow, they should defeat a boss next. Joe thinks that even if Mike was once a famous novelist, right now he sounds delusional. A scream suddenly echoes from around the corner. A man runs out, warning about monsters. A massive worm follows him, far bigger and stronger than the previous ones. It quickly catches up to the fleeing man. In a blink, the man is gone without a trace. Mike calmly notes that this must be the boss they need to kill. While the pair hesitate, Joe starts preparing an attack. Using his newly gained fire control, he strikes the boss, dealing massive damage. Still, the boss is beyond him, only set ablaze for a short time. Burning, the boss suddenly charges straight at them. Joe orders the others to run. He keeps blasting fire while the group reaches a crossroads. The worm smashes through a wall and cuts Joe off from the pair. The boss faces the hero, preparing to strike, but Joe stays sharp. The monster freezes, stares at him, then suddenly lunges toward the others. Joe launches fireballs that slam into the chitin armor. Enraged, the creature spits sticky webbing, but the hero dodges clean. A chase begins as Joe tries to lure it into a narrow path, but the tail strike knocks him down. Wounded but relentless, the monster advances, eyes glowing and venom leaking. Gathering strength, Joe hurls a fireball straight into its mouth. The creature collapses, still glaring with pure hatred. May grabs an iron beam and throws it, drawing the monster's focus. It spits larvae at her, but Joe burns them midair. May animates broken wood with magic, turning it into vines that bind the beast. Joe ignites them, and the monster howls in flames, helpless. At last it crumbles into ash, smoke filling the air. Exhausted, Joe drops to his knees, but May helps him stand. They head for the exit, praying to finally escape this nightmare zone. Instead of fresh air, a dark hall opens up, an ancient totem standing at its core. The door behind them vanishes, sealing them inside the trap. Other survivors soon gather there, Mike among them. Mike looks stunned, but May snaps, calling out his selfish moves. The lights die, and a masked man appears, claiming to be an agent of the Central Fate Protection Office. His icy tone declares everyone under his control, sparking outrage across the hall. Standing aside, Joe knows this life will not play out the same way. He is no longer a loser, but someone able to bend his own fate. Joe and the girl are just as confused, having never heard of such an agency. The masked stranger keeps talking about protecting humanity from a coming disaster. The furious crowd cuts him off, trusting none of his words. They do not understand him and try to leave. After a pause, he continues, warning that a demon dimension will one day emerge and drown the world in chaos. He is interrupted again, with people raging about the swarm of insects that attacked them earlier. The speaker's nerves finally begin to crack. Suddenly, Mike shouts across the hall, telling everyone to shut it. The crowd turns toward him. He keeps going, angry that people fail to see the massive opportunity dropped in their laps. Joe watches silently, disliking the kid's extreme tone but knowing he is not wrong. The masked agent decides to show proof, revealing the outside world. A screen lights up, broadcasting live footage from their city streets. Across the country and beyond, so-called demon dimensions have appeared. From them poured endless monsters, though the agency was ready for this. Years ago, a small group awakened special powers and called themselves the Heralds. They defended the world daily but knew a day would come when they could not stand alone. That is why more awakened were needed, and why everyone here was gathered. Anyone unwilling to help is free to leave, no chains attached. Still, the stranger asks them to trust his powers first, as minds can change. The crowd begins testing their abilities en masse. Joe, meanwhile, is focused on something else, wondering who hides beneath the mask. The man on stage urges everyone to review their abilities carefully. He warns that despite their power, death can come easily. That danger applies even during training. Anyone unwilling to risk their life may renounce their powers. The agent gives them exactly 1 hour to decide. On the second floor, a lounge and simple guides are revealed. The building shifts, new corridors forming out of thin air. The stranger leaves, disappearing into the unknown. Exactly 1 hour later, everyone is returned to the hall. The agent opens gates, allowing those who stay to enter the trial chamber. To finish training, every trial must be cleared. He hands out small boxes to store personal belongings. He warns that once consent is given, the agency bears no responsibility for their lives. Wishing them luck, the masked man vanishes, leaving heavy silence behind. Suddenly someone shouts, searching for partners to enter the dungeon. Mei rushes to Joe, thanking him for saving her more than once. Since Joe is still alone, she offers to team up with him. The offer hits the hero like a shockwave. The girl stares at him, clearly surprised by his reaction. Joe realizes this outcome came from the fear he once carried deep inside. Seeing something off with him, the girl checks if he is okay. He quickly pulls himself together, signaling that everything is fine. Still, he is forced to refuse joining the team. With a guarded look, he decides it is better for him to travel solo. The girl looks hurt, having believed they would make a solid squad. Joe insists she would pair better with anyone else but him. Mei watches his back with clear disappointment. She shouts after him, hoping he can take care of himself during the hunt. Joe keeps walking toward the portal, answering only with a firm nod. Joe enters a supply room. He takes one kit and opens it. Inside are health and mana meds, plus a training sword. For now, that loadout should be enough. Suddenly, Mike calls out to him from nearby. He hopes Joe will not abandon his one and only partner. Joe feels awkward, unused to this kind of bond. The white-haired guy rushes over and grabs Joe by the shoulder. He dreams that if luck holds, the two of them could become the story's main heroes. Joe repeats that he fights best alone. Mike keeps pushing, wearing a confident grin, swearing he will never ditch a teammate. Joe doubts him, remembering how Mike once underestimated him as a clan leader. Still, having such a strong partner would be nice. In the end, if something happens, Joe feels he has little to lose. After thinking it through, Joe agrees to the deal. Mike runs off, heading to grab supplies. While he gears up, May stands nearby, choosing her own equipment. Mike cannot figure out why she looks at him with envy. He guesses it is because Joe did not take her along, making her nervous. The kid dashes back to his teammate, leaving May alone as the pair enter the portal. The rules state that all corridors connect, with traps or safe zones in every room. The main objective is to find the exit. Walking the tunnels, Joe compares the layout to his past life. Mike eagerly waits for traps and demons to fight. Joe yanks him back just as a sword trap snaps up from the floor. Mike laughs it off, lying there to watch the trap while Joe moves on. Joe never triggers a single trap along the way. Spotting bodies ahead, Joe checks if Mike spent his experience points. A fight is coming. At the next level entrance, glowing cave skeletons appear. Mike braces for danger, but Joe already fires off fireballs. Some skeletons burn away, the rest rush the duo. Joe strikes mid-jump while Mike jumps in, refusing to stay a side character. Blending blows and magic, they wipe out the enemies, and Mike loves the pace. Clearing room after room, they slaughter hundreds of weak foes. Joe watches quietly as Mike suddenly asks if he is from the future. Shocked, Joe stays silent, having already warned him not to talk nonsense. They move on. Mike still suspicious. Joe clears monsters far too easily. Joe brushes it off, blaming it on seeing ghosts as a kid. Mike wants the full story when something slams into his back. Turning around, he sees stones dropping from the ceiling straight toward Joe. It seems the duo missed a detail and walked straight into a trap. The heroes rush upward to the next floor. As Mike climbs the stairs, each step collapses behind him. He turns in horror and realizes his partner is gone, left below with no time to climb. Given this mess, it feels like proof he was right calling others NPCs. Turning away, Mike moves on to explore the upper levels alone. Meanwhile, Joe falls, failing to reach the stairs in time. To avoid dying in the abyss, he draws his katana and drives it into the stone. The blade slows his fall just enough to survive. He drops to the ground and scans his surroundings. A message flashes, announcing entry into a secret zone. Enemies here are far stronger than usual. He is even offered a chance to leave if he truly wants out. Joe refuses to quit that easily. This feels like a rare shot to gain more stats than expected. He begins charging fireballs for an opening strike. Dozens of skeletons rush straight at him. As warned, these foes are tougher, forcing him to fight at full focus. After the battle, Joe gains a solid level boost, making the dungeon easier ahead. Nearly all his abilities now reach level 4. Higher rank means faster growth, and Joe wonders how far he can push this. Those with divine power rise far quicker than the rest. While surveying the dungeon, he recalls unfinished business. Now is the perfect time to face the boss. Joe stands before a long torch-lit corridor. The air feels wrong, the presence inside far stronger than anything before. Crossing the threshold, he grabs a torch and advances. Inside, he spots several bosses, generals of the Devil Dagger Mountain. To plan his moves, Joe hides behind cover. He heard of these generals before, but facing several at once sparks fear. Sticking to the plan is his only path to victory. The moment he peeks out, an enemy strikes, his position exposed. Joe dodges cleanly and leaps forward, wounding one boss. By luring them one by one, he buys precious time. Behind him, one boss begins regenerating. As long as both live, they will heal each other. A direct fight is now pointless. Enduring several hits, Joe dashes into position. Suddenly, one enemy knocks him down, nearly sending him off the roof. Joe counters with a burst of fire. One boss triggers a trap and loses his head instantly. Only a single enemy remains. Joe sprints down the corridor, the boss closing in as wind whistles ahead. Suddenly, a second general appears, fully restored. Joe leaps at him, slamming the enemy to the ground. Multiple foes are sent into traps at once, with zero chance to escape. The fight finally ends in victory. Joe stands victorious as the system tallies his rewards. His next objective is to exit the trial chamber. But first, he wants to test one last theory. If the monsters are this strong and almost human, Maybe their destinies can be taken too. The hero activates the Fate Steal ability. A glowing blue magic circle forms around him. The system reports two bodies with abilities detected in range. Joe feels a surge of hype, meaning humanoid beings also carry stealable fate. He never avoided the skill before out of fear, he simply lacked the mana to use it. Fate Steal has a harsh limit, draining more mana the longer it stays active. That is why Joe could only use it when someone died right in front of him. That moment sparked the idea of stealing fate from humanoid enemies. He absorbs the abilities of the fallen bosses, boosting both power and weapon mastery. Suddenly, a new skill unlocks, Blade Unsheathing. Joe tests the power, striking an invisible foe with sharp, clean techniques. The new blade feels light, yet packed with raw force. A warning pops up, noting a large amount of stored mana. Even if the gain is not massive, it was absolutely worth it. Joe heads straight toward the portal. He wonders how close his mana level is to the danger threshold. Entering the portal, the first chamber of Devil Dagger Mountain is fully cleared for the first time ever. Outside, the waiting heroes notice Joe emerging from the dungeon. They are stunned that someone cleared it solo. Unfortunately for Joe, his former teammate Mike also exits and rushes toward him. Joe shields himself, trying to dodge the non-stop questions. Suddenly, the red-haired stranger calls Joe over. He congratulates him on the first clear and asks for a brief moment. They move to a private room to talk. Joe receives a personal item bag, likely a reward for the first clear. Such items are rare, so missing this chance was never an option. Turning on the news, Joe feels a chill. Disasters spread nationwide, earthquakes driving the death toll higher, yet there is no sign of the secret agency anywhere. Suddenly, he stumbles upon a video. A woman claiming to be a fate protection agent repeats the same story told during orientation. It seems they use special items to shield destinies, and Joe has received one as well. The agency urges the public to trust them. Joe stays skeptical, remembering similar words long ago. Back then, the agency was stacked with the strongest awakened fighters. Yet every member hides behind a mask. A realization hits him hard. The woman who tried to kill him was one of the top 5. If she was the strongest of that order, it explains why her true power stayed hidden. The scene shifts to an unfamiliar office. The leader slams papers on the desk, scolding the team. He cannot grasp how a third-rank insectoid has stalled them for over a week. He assigns the task to one specific fighter. The rest are dismissed to handle other duties. Left alone, the hero panics, wondering what happens if his trap tactics get exposed. The scene cuts to a cafeteria, where Mike suggests continuing dungeon clears together. Joe declines, moving at his own pace, and notices girls thanking May for help. Watching calmly, Joe sees they are fine, until a green-haired man pushes May to fortune tell. When May agrees, Joe steps in and asks her to talk privately. On the way to a quiet room, friends recognize Joe and thank him for access to Wi-Fi. It turns out that after clearing the dungeon, he gained unlimited internet and shared it with friendly people around him. Joe walks beside May in silence, feeling awkward from the attention, since in his past life people mostly avoided him. Because of that, the hero grew distant and emotionally closed off. Even so, he always had a few comrades who treated him well. Many of them openly supported the hero. One day in a corridor, Joe overheard strangers discussing his ability. That shook him hard, since only one person could have known about it, the one he trusted most. Losing control, the hero sprinted toward that person. Bursting into the room, he immediately demanded to know why the secret was revealed. The other denied everything, claiming complete ignorance. There was no direct proof pointing to him, so nothing could be confirmed. It turned out Joe's friend could see other people's fate windows just by touching them. The story jumps back, with Joe telling the girl it is best to avoid any contact with such a person. The girl realizes she narrowly avoided a serious trap. Joe is about to leave when the girl suddenly stops him. She recently cleared the first chamber as well. She asks whether the hero wants to go together next time. Joe explains that with her, things would become far more complicated. May cannot understand why the hero chose to avoid her specifically. Looking away, Joe awkwardly explains that the issue is her lack of experience. The girl freezes, clearly not expecting that answer. She never thought he saw her as that helpless. He warns her that her ability will weaken in the next chamber due to a fire attribute. Her trefoil technique will be useless since branches burn easily, as proven before. Only then does the girl understand why they would be a bad team. Suddenly, she calls out to him again, stopping him right at the exit. She thanks the hero for his honest answer. Confused, Joe hastily leaves the building. Why would she react like that even after he refused to fight together? The girl herself does not understand why the hero keeps his distance. He pulled her aside and warned her about a possible enemy. The excuse he made was rushed and could have been better. The girl starts thinking that the hero is actually worried about her. Meanwhile, Joe runs into the same guy who reads fate through palms in the corridor, who asks about teaming up with the girl. Hiding his hands, Joe answers that he will enter the dungeon alone. He wants to get rid of the annoying guy fast before he causes trouble again. Suddenly, the man stops him and suggests forming a party together. He claims he would be useful since his rank is higher, a dragon rank. Joe, suddenly furious, turns on the guy and asks about his ability. The answer is simple: he can shoot water. Joe reluctantly accepts the deal and agrees to head out immediately. His new partner asks for a minute to prepare and promises to come down soon. The hero silently watches him leave. He cannot believe his luck. The very friend who betrayed him in a past life approached him on his own. After some time, the two prepare to enter the dungeon. The mission is to find an ice crystal and return it, with no time limit. Stepping through the portal, the pair witness a hellish landscape. Lava rivers flow everywhere. The heat is brutal. Joe's new companion is surprised he was accepted, believing it is thanks to his water attribute. He asks Joe for his thoughts on the run, unable to imagine how ice could exist among lava rivers. While gathering water for an attack, he notices Joe already locked in, sword drawn and stance sharp like a seasoned anime MC. Mark panics and activates blade detection, only to realize Joe had merely taken out a single lava toad. Suddenly, hundreds of lava frogs swarm in. The water user wipes most of them out with one flashy move. Mark feels hyped, but Joe stays serious, sensing bad vibes ahead. When Mark's mana runs dry, he clumsily grabs his sword and gets taken down fast. Joe tells him to fall back, confident he can handle things solo. Offended, Mark suspects Joe is hiding something by relying only on his blade, then abruptly sits on a rock. Putting on an exhausted act, he collapses like he is on death's door. The rock morphs into a monster, and Mark panics again, calling for help. Help comes instantly, as a katana slices clean through the crab and its shell in one motion. Turns out the dungeon holds more than frogs, and losing focus here means instant death. Joe hints this is the second save already, and things will only get harder from here. Maybe turning back would be the smart move. Mark forces a grin, but inside he is boiling with rage at Joe's calm hypocrisy. He swears to figure everything out once his strength returns. Suddenly, Joe turns his head. Mark instantly switches back to an innocent expression. The pair move on and finally spot something crystal-like, and Joe knows they reach the goal. It rests on a pedestal, with only the path left to solve. Mark is thrilled too, planning to let his partner clear the room for him. He wants to be the first to finish the dungeon. The moment Joe looks away, Mark dashes toward the crystal. If there is only one crystal, he will take it and end the trial himself. Mark sprints at full speed toward the prize. Visions of rewards and fame blind his judgment. He refuses to share that glory with Joe. Being first to reach the chamber, he already sees himself as the winner. Suddenly his hand grabs something slick. It is a pouch filled with fire frog eggs. From beneath the lava, frogs burst out by the hundreds. They grab Mark and drag him straight into the lava. Joe does not move an inch to save his former partner. Karma took its due. Turning away, he searches for the crystal while Mark's screams echo behind. After some time, Joe enters a cave of ice crystals. He finds a true third-grade phantom-type ice crystal. The hero opens the shop, unlocked using spirit pearls. Normally, he should not even know about this yet. But luck was on his side when he found pearls early on. He buys several prayer boxes. He trades them for stats, since his funds are limited. Crossing his arms, he opens a box. His crystal is demonic but only third-rate, while he aims for top tier. He hopes prayers will raise the crystal's rank. Suddenly, the prayer box glows with golden light. Joe obtains third-grade insect honey and tries again, gathering a mountain of ice. Nearby, the surviving Mike drags himself across the lava wasteland on sheer will. Spotting a blue item, he realizes it is a crystal, grabs it, and escapes first, igniting crowd hype. Celebrating his victory, Mark notices Joe sitting nearby. Mark starts yelling accusations, but a masked man cuts him off. Wearing a fake smile, Joe shakes Mark's hand and secretly activates palm reading. Seeing Joe's pathetic public rank, just an insectoid, Mark turns away in disappointment. Joe exhales, knowing the cursed amulet hides his real power. Mark's crystal was one of the ones Joe lost before. Mark brags to the masked man, polishing his feats. Mike, salty that Joe ditched him again, eats up Mark's story. Mark twists the knife, spreading lies about Joe running the moment enemies appeared. Flattered by praise, Mark accepts it without hesitation. Joe watches from the side with a quiet smile. The plan worked perfectly, cutting out two annoying rivals at once. Meanwhile, a secret office gathers its team for an emergency meeting. The leader confirms Mark holds a demonic rank. It feels off that Mark and Joe entered together, yet only Mark emerged as the winner. A blue-eyed woman reports something odd. Mark claimed he found the crystal inside a frog. By the rules, monsters should never reach the crystal cave due to the barrier. That report makes the leader furious. It feels impossible that a group like theirs still cannot stop Joe. Slamming the table, he demands a report from one of his subordinates. The plan calls for several agents to infiltrate Joe's room and sabotage him. From the third gate onward, heroes will face a true demon dimension. Monsters inside must be boosted to the absolute limit. They also need to closely observe Joe. Near the gates, a crowd gathers, confused as the doors stay shut with no opening time announced. Time skips forward a few days. In the cafeteria, Joe overhears a conversation. They discuss how to raid the second dungeon efficiently. Everyone has tactics, each running with their own squad. The most successful clears all happened under Mark's lead. Maybe they should look for him again and ask for help. Joe smiles quietly, guessing Mark once again fed people fake stories. Evening comes. Everyone gathers before the third door as a masked woman greets them. She announces she gathered everyone to explain the third gate. First, she finally unseals the locked doors. The crowd erupts, having waited a long time for this. She adds that these are the first gates leading to a true demon dimension. From now on, heroes will no longer face trials alone. The demon realm is far harsher than anything they faced before. During their journey, gods will observe them. If a divine voice is heard, heroes must not answer right away, only follow guidance. With that, the woman leaves them. She ends by wishing everyone survival. Those words unsettle many in the group. Joe stands silently, carefully weighing every word she said. Suddenly, a small girl approaches him. Twin girls ask if he can tell them apart, since no one else can. Of course he can. In his past life, they were the only ones who ever spoke to him. Joe notices the same warning as before, saying a sinister aura gathers around Jel. He watches the girls in silence. In the past life, Bomb survived. Her sister died in the third room. Now the girls joke around, asking Joe to enter the gate with them. Even during this brief moment, they start arguing, and Joe agrees to go along. He swears that this time the girls will survive, no matter what fate tries to pull. This time they step into an ice-filled chamber. A brutal wind hits instantly, freezing the air and shaving a few % off their stats. Joe moves in front with the girls following close behind. Their mission here is simple and savage: hunt monsters, and wipe out 10 different species. Suddenly, one girl spots a small group of rabbits grazing nearby. In a blink, the rabbits turn feral, eyes flooding red. They rush the travelers, tearing forward like living blades. The group shuts them down fast, leaving no threat behind. Soon they sit on a rock to rest and check the shop. The girls are stunned by how easily Joe finds the right items. To him, it feels like an old game he mastered long ago. One girl asks him to check her weapon, tempted by the idea of buying a bow and arrows. Joe helps them gear up, one getting a bow, the other a pistol. The girls test their strength on live targets, and soon the area has no rabbits left alive. Their efficiency spikes once they use weapons that match their instincts. In a past life, Bomb was a top-tier sniper. Her sister would have reached the same heights if she had not died that day. After her sister's death, Bomb changed completely and never smiled again. She threw herself into monster hunting like a quiet revenge. Eventually, Bomb was recruited into one of the great clans, Asura. Still, true happiness never found her. Joe knows their destinies shine brightest together. If Bomb's sister survives today, reality itself may shift. He has to stay on guard every second. Joe turns his head to check on the girls. He freezes in pure dread. Jell is gone with only Bomb standing nearby. The two instantly rush to search for the missing girl. Joe keeps shouting her name through the icy wind. Bomb cannot understand how Jell could wander so far just to find a restroom. Joe swears he heard screams nearby, though Bomb heard nothing at all. They spot a crack in the ground and Jell's voice echoes from below. Looking down, they see Jell at the bottom of a cave with an unknown man beside her. Joe drops down immediately, worried about the girl's safety. He suddenly recognizes the stranger. It is Mark, the same guy who reads palms. Mark clearly hates seeing Joe with the girls but keeps silent. Joe asks the green-haired man if he needs help. Mark snaps back that he needs no help from a coward like Joe. Joe does not argue, simply turns around and walks away. While climbing up, Gell explains the stranger's leg was paralyzed by a monster attack. Joe knows Mark will manage alone, since a rabbit attack was never that serious. Mark, writhing in pain, curses Joe in his mind. He becomes obsessed with humiliating him one day. Suddenly, Mark hears a strange voice he has never heard before. The voice says bad people must pay for their sins and asks Mark if he wants help. Meanwhile, the trio decides to return to the safe zone, since monsters grow stronger after dark. The girls want to keep grinding stats, but Joe insists there is no rush on the first day. He promises to continue clearing the level with them, which lifts their spirits. Suddenly, something catches Joe's attention. He hears the same unknown voice as well. The man instantly rushes toward the voice, signaling the girls to retreat back to the portal. At the same time, deep in the icy lands, a group of people is surrounded by a wolf pack. The beasts are starving and furious, leaving the group with slim chances of survival. Among them stands May, acting as commander, forcing everyone to stay calm. Suddenly, wolves break through the formation. May activates the clover method, striking the pack head-on. She also engages the remaining wolves with her blade. She fights like 10 warriors at once, healing the survivors mid-battle. May is certain she must give everything and take down as many enemies as possible. Out of nowhere, a wolf strikes from behind, catching her off guard. Joe saves her, killing the wolf with a sharp, clean thrust. He immediately charges the remaining wolves under May's shocked gaze. Joe wields his sword flawlessly, weaving fire magic into every move. After a brutal clash, the group wins. The survivors are exhausted. May thanks Joe, but he stays silent. Time shifts to the safe zone. An angry Joe scolds May for not retreating earlier. He reminds her that the odds were never in their favor. He drills into her that if victory is impossible, retreat is mandatory. Joe believes she survived only by luck. Hidden monster skills would have killed her. Fueled by rage, he insists that saving others is a privilege of the strong. If she stays reckless, she will end up as nothing but a corpse. Several teammates rush to support May, but she is not upset. Laughing it off, She reassures them that Joe is just worried about her. She still cannot grasp why he plays the villain, yet knows he is kind at heart and thanks him anyway. Joe exhales in relief, glad his words were understood, and moves on. After some time, Joe enters the dungeon again. He tells the girls he will stay until they finish their business in the third room. Once they clear it, he will leave and focus on his own objectives. Joe's true goal is a hidden reward for killing 11 monster species. Watching the girls, he notes that raids now end far faster than in his past life. Suddenly, his fate detection ability activates. A warning appears about approaching White Tiger death energy. Joe considers simply eliminating such an annoying threat. He orders the girls not to split up while he is gone. He hopes they can hold out together. Suddenly, Joe spots Mark approaching in the distance, clearly looking for him. Mark spins an ice crystal in his hand, aiming to repay a debt. His revenge is for the humiliation Joe dealt him before. Joe draws his sword, challenging whether Mark truly has the strength. This attitude drives Mark into a frenzy, enraged that Joe refuses to see him as the protagonist. The villain prepares his attack, hurling ice crystals at Joe with godlike force. Joe recalls the early warning, when gods speak, silence is survival. Now a deity has seized Mark's mind, twisting him into madness. Mark attacks, declaring himself chosen. Those who bargain with gods are known as shamans. They gain immense power in exchange for obsession. Joe is lucky the god controlling Mark is low tier. Mark's mana surged, and a new skill awakened. He can now infect enemies with pox during combat. Joe is not worried, only irritated. His first move is clear: drain the enemy's mana. Creating a fake route, Joe plans to run Mark ragged before striking back. He charges after Joe, convinced divine punishment will hunt the hero to the very end. Suddenly, a stampede of wild boars cuts across his path. The chaos slows the pursuer and drains his mana reserves fast. Out of nowhere, a giant boar slams into Mark, lifting him on its tusks. The blow nearly kills him, blood spilling from his mouth. The beast tosses him aside and runs off, leaving both host and god broken on the ground. Joe hears several unfamiliar voices echoing nearby. More gods were watching, now mocking the weakness of the minor deity. Suddenly, a sword pierces Mark's shoulder, forcing a scream of pain. Joe is already beside him, calmly watching the agony, the game clearly over. He drags the blade along the wound, amplifying the suffering. Joe wonders if this revenge was worth it after such a long hunt. He hopes Mark understood the risk when he brought a blade to Joe's throat. A girl appears in the distance, one of Joe's companions. Joe calls Mark lucky and pulls the sword away. He warns him that there will be no second chance. Joe turns to the girl, who ignored his order and ran after him with urgent news. Out of breath, she reports a herd of snow boars arriving. They drag Jell away before Bomb could react. Joe freezes in horror, recalling the fortune teller's prophecy. He suspects his own aura keeps pulling disaster closer. Passing Bomb, he assures her he will find Jell and moves out immediately. Bomb tries to chase after him. Joe orders her to go back. She grabs his arm, insisting on helping save her sister. Joe worries for her too, fearing she might be lost as well. She reminds him of his own rule about not splitting up. She refuses to turn back while her sister is in danger. Joe agrees to take her, but only if she retreats the moment things go wrong. He does not know how she died last time, but now the danger is real. After a while, they find no monsters along the way. Joe knows why, but stays silent. Low-rank beasts avoid this territory. A strange sound echoes ahead, and Joe instantly pulls Bomb aside. A massive third-class demonic yeti appears on the road ahead. Even Joe feels fear facing such a monster. Nearby, Gel's body lies on a rock. Bomb breaks free and raises her gun, rage blazing in her eyes. Joe grabs her in time and pulls her behind cover. The monster fails to react in time. Joe activates Fate Theft. Luckily, the system reports no corpses within range. Joe exhales, warning Bomb that fighting now would endanger Jell even more. They must wait for the perfect opening to retrieve her. Joe explains the plan. Once the monster sets Gel down, Bomb fires to draw attention, then runs. No fighting, only escape, while Joe handles Gel. With her agility, she should outrun the Yeti easily. From a higher vantage point, Bomb watches through her scope as the monster sets Gel down. She fires a rocket. A flash of light blinds the monster and grabs its attention. Recovering fast, the Yeti charges after the girl. She starts running too, sprinting with everything she has. Joe wastes no time and dashes toward Gel while the Yeti is distracted. Gel lies unconscious in the nest, but she is clearly still alive. Lifting her up, Joe realizes healing her right now is impossible. He has no choice but to carry her to the training center. Suddenly, he spots another Yeti nearby. The beast stands close to the nest, locking eyes with the hero. In a burst of rage, it lunges into an attack. Joe fights back disbelief, cursed by his own bad luck. Using pure agility, he dodges the incoming blows. He slips under the Yeti's leg, vanishing before it can track him. Then he notices something he never expected. A second Yeti charges at him, abandoning the chase after the girl. From both sides, massive enemies rush straight at the hero. Joe evades again, retreating back toward the nest. He gently sets Gel down and ignites the nest, knowing he would burn it anyway. The girl remains unconscious on the ground. Joe urges her to hold on just a little longer. He plans to go all out and end the monsters fast. The pair of Yetis charge him together. Stepping away from the burning branches, Joe draws his blade and prepares. A plan suddenly clicks in his mind. He launches straight into the attack. Joe boosts his agility to level 18, letting him slide through strikes. The enemies cannot keep up as he vanishes and reappears mid-motion. Their frustration keeps building with every miss. With another leap, Joe forces the Yetis to collide and climb over each other. One precise strike shatters the ice beneath them. Both monsters plunge into a bottomless abyss. Joe knew this area was filled with fragile ice and snow layers. Gel's fall earlier proved how easy it was to vanish here. Suddenly, the remaining Yeti slams the ice with its fist, cracking it apart. Joe, caught off guard, begins falling along with it. Out of nowhere, a platform of living wood appears beneath him. It was May, saving him at the last second with her ability. She mocks him for his recklessness, echoing his own words, but is relieved she arrived in time. Joe thanks her sincerely. She replies that the credit belongs to the girl who found her. Mee starts pulling him up, but Joe stops her to check something first. Above, Bomb desperately tries to wake Gel, but her eyes stay closed. As Joe climbs back up, he fears they arrive too late. He wonders if fate can no longer be changed. Suddenly, May's grim expression turns bright. Gel wakes up, searching for her sister and shivering from the cold. After a moment, she realizes she is not home and is surrounded by people. Joe watches in silent shock as the white tiger's death aura fades away. Relief floods him as he rushes toward the girl. Another alert hits him as fate itself begins to shift. Joe's rank changes from third-class insectoid to second-class insectoid. Once again, the hero is stunned, never imagining that a fate rank could be altered. Bomb throws herself into the hero's arms, overwhelmed with gratitude for saving the girl. Joe simply smiles and calms her down without a word. Meanwhile, May supports Gel, handing her different medicines one after another. Right now, the only thing that truly matters is that Gel survived. Joe managed to change fate. The story shifts back to Mark. Wandering among towering ice slabs and bare rocks, he panics, desperately trying to figure out his next move. He blames the god, realizing too late that the deal was a lie and never worth it. Fueled by rage, Mark stumbles and gets trapped inside a narrow gorge. Suddenly, he hears a familiar presence behind him. Mike has found him and now watches in silence. As always, Mark starts blaming Joe, accusing him of betrayal and running away. The one who found him calmly judges that if Mark were truly the main character, he would have cleared every obstacle himself. Instead, he lost to Joe. Realizing how bad things are, Mark begs for help. Mike refuses without hesitation. He walks away, never looking back. There is no reason to help a loser who is not the protagonist. Joe battles countless monsters, surrounded by millions of unseen watching eyes. With the twins' help, the fight is won, but they immediately start arguing over who contributed more. Smiling at their bickering, Joe suddenly senses danger and forcefully pushes the girls aside, revealing the same mysterious sword-wielding killer behind him. The stranger delivers an ultimatum, demanding Joe in exchange for their lives, while the twins brace themselves to fight back. Joe tries to stop them, but thousands of monstrous hands seize him, locking his body. When he breaks free, he finds himself in a sea of blood, surrounded by lifeless bodies. Dead eyes accuse him in silence, and May's voice echoes with regret about his arrival in the clan. Joe jolts awake, realizing it was only a nightmare born from fear and guilt. Even though memories of his past life still haunt him, this time he is determined not to repeat the tragedy. A realization strikes him. Perhaps he is approaching his limit. Every single action grants him more mana, and that endless growth could eventually kill him. Joe decides to distance himself from others, and when the girls invite him on another journey, he refuses. They cannot understand why he suddenly ignores them, wondering if he somehow came to hate them. Joe closes the door in front of them, noticing that they have grown close to May, which strangely reassures him. They still do not understand his behavior, but believe there must be a reason behind it. Heading down the stairs, they silently shake their heads at May nearby, signaling that Joe is not coming. Accepting that nothing can be done, the group moves on to the fourth room. The fourth room turns out to be the Sword Forest, where the task is to collect 1,000 spirit pearls. The girls admire the fresh air. No factories, no machines, only endless trees. Suddenly, May senses something approaching. It is not a monster. The forest itself is hostile and already striking at the intruders. The Sword Forest is a demonic dimension of endless woodland. Sharpened branches hang from the trees, edges keener than blades. The heroes realize that gathering 1,000 pearls will be far harder than expected. Remembering Joe's advice, the girls decide to stick together. Still, they feel disappointed that the hero did not come with them. May silently notes that the girls have already come to appreciate his kindness. His methods may be harsh, but he is undeniably a good person. Suddenly, she notices something nearby. May shouts for Gel, who has drifted away from the group, to stop. At that moment, something on the ground catches Gel's attention. The scene shifts to Joe's room. He carefully examines an unfamiliar egg. The egg was a reward for defeating the Yetis, the 11th monster type, and whatever hatches from it now depends entirely on Joe himself. To keep it from biting again and to stop the egg from trying to eat everything in sight, the hero ties a handkerchief around its mouth. However, those were not the only summons. When the hero defeated the Yeti, he also activated fate stealing. Thanks to that, he obtained the abilities Fighter's Instincts and the Water attribute. In that very moment, the hero decided to test the new attribute. Raising his hand, he admires the newfound power as hundreds of water droplets rise into the air. His suppressed stats return to normal. In the next dimension, the hero plans to buy weapons, and that is where fire will truly shine. Joe steps through the fourth door. The moment he enters the dimension, he immediately hears several gods talking among themselves. They discuss a few rookies, as watching their growth is prime entertainment for the gods. Joe quickly grows tired of their pointless chatter and decides to cut them off. For a split second, he even wonders what to call them: low-tier evil spirits or wandering ghosts. However, he lacks the mana needed to mute the gods completely. One of the gods offers the hero a contract. Under that god's patronage, he would become far stronger than anyone in the territory. But the moment he leaves the god's domain, all that borrowed power would vanish. He buys an item from the shop, a map of the demon dimension. Now he finally has everything he needs to leave the forest. The map currently shows only major landmarks, but new ones will appear as he explores further. Suddenly, the hero hears yet another unfamiliar voice. Just like the others, he ignores it. The Lord of Fire offers him a contract, even activating several abilities to prove his might. Suddenly, a special message appears for a few minutes. The Lord of Fire persistently urges the hero to accept his protection. Joe is stunned by the sudden offer and does not know how to react. He is deeply moved that such a powerful god would willingly offer a contract to a second-rate insectoid. Even so, he is forced to refuse. The hero receives a message stating that the Lord of Fire is now watching him. Traveling through the jungle, the hero cuts down enemies along the way. Over all this time, he manages to collect only 36 pearls out of the required amount. They are not too hard to obtain, but finding the right opponents is the real challenge. In his past life, the hero had to slaughter hundreds of mantises simply because he was too weak. Suddenly, the hero steps into blood. It looks like the aftermath of a trap. Someone was unlucky. However, he cannot understand why there would be human blood here. Could it be that an enemy from his past life has already made a move? In his previous life, he became the target of a masked assassin, and May saved him back then. During that fight, she lost an eye. After that, the enemy escaped, and no one ever discovered who was behind the mask. The hero runs along the blood trail stretching for dozens of meters. Suddenly, he notices a painfully familiar body lying on the ground. An unknown man is crouched beside the girl. Rage explodes within the hero as he draws his sword, ready to strike without hesitation. He orders the stranger to step away from the body. Meanwhile, back at the office, people are actively discussing Mark, who went missing in the icy region. He was the first to clear the infernal flame room, so far more was expected of him. A blue-eyed girl suggests launching a search for the missing man. However, the leader insists everything is fine and that they must not interfere in matters tied to demon dimensions. Everyone understood the risk of death long before stepping through the door. Still, he realizes that overthinking this is pointless, since another department has already presented the one who cleared the room. That means the next clear must belong to their side. Sometime after the meeting, the guy asks the blue-eyed girl if she plans to keep working here, since the very concept of death deeply unsettles her. She has no intention of stepping away. Suddenly, she admits that something else has been bothering her. She recently reviewed the student archives. It turned out that one of the students was a serial killer. At the same time, Joe drives strangers away from the girl. They suggest talking things out first. The guy explains that they tried to heal the girl and even shows an antidote bought from the shop. The hero orders everyone to lower their weapons. The girl is still alive, suffering from fever and paralysis, so she clearly needs the antidote. He asks the others how he is supposed to trust them. The tense standoff is broken when May and the rest of her group arrive. She warns the hero that these people are not lying. Even so, the hero remains suspicious, unable to grasp what is really going on. One of the girls from the squad explains the situation. Jel fell into a trap, and another nearby group agreed to help. They are now trying to heal her, and the girl has just dismantled the traps scattered around the area. Joe still treats the group with distrust, as his memories tell him that a former enemy would be skilled with poisons. What troubles him most is the ability of the man currently administering the antidote to Jel. That man possesses invisibility. However, he is far too weak to seriously harm anyone. After a brief pause, Joe agrees. Jel regains consciousness and lies on the ground, and the hero suggests taking her along. Even if none of them is the killer, staying close to strangers from another zone is dangerous. Night approaches as the group sets up camp deep in the forest, where darkness falls fast. One of the twins admits she has never slept in a forest before. The other laughs it off, teasing her for being scared. Meanwhile, Joe prepares food over the campfire. He tosses a strange sphere into the flames. He explains to the girls that it is a special item bought from the shop to repel monsters. The twins are amazed by how smart and strong the hero is. Riding that moment, one of the girls asks if she can become his student. The request catches the hero off guard. The other twin quickly joins in, asking to become his student as well. That immediately sparks another argument between them. Joe states that he has no intention of teaching anyone, so they should calm down. Suddenly, the hero hears a voice questioning why he appeared in their lives at all. The girl has no idea what is happening to him. Grabbing his katana, he walks into the forest, his mana acting up. He chooses to wait far away, so by morning the camp should not expect him back. The girls watch his retreating figure with disappointment. Walking through the forest, the hero feels no pride in his own actions. Deep in the woods, he tries feeding the egg by offering it a twig. The egg rejects it, spitting the substance out. The strange egg suddenly demands meat and declares a hunger strike. Joe is far from pleased and forces it to eat what it is given. The hero decides to spend the night perched in a tree overlooking the clearing where his group rests. The gods continue their pointless chatter, which the hero can still hear as he dreams of raising his mana enough to silence them. Joe settles into the branches, getting as comfortable as he can. From this perch, he can see the whole camp. The twins are arguing like always, while May watches over them. The hero smiles at the scene below. It reminds him of the soaring tiger clan from his past life. Mai used to smile the same way while watching them back then. In those days, the group truly lived well together. Joe feels a twinge of nostalgia and thinks that a clan like that might rise again in this new life. Suddenly, he catches a strange, sickly sweet scent in the air. Dropping from the tree, the hero starts searching for the source of the smell. May and the others are startled by his sudden appearance. Without answering any questions, he immediately moves off to track the sweet scent. He soon finds what he was looking for and double-checks with the girl whether anyone passed nearby while he was gone. Several fruits lie on the ground, radiating that same sugary aroma. They could not have appeared naturally. These were demonic peaches, their scent easily luring demonic beasts. There are no fruit trees nearby, so the hero realizes someone planted them here on purpose. Most likely it was that same killer. One of the twins suddenly recalls that a guy passed by earlier. Joe is surprised it was not someone from another department, but that very guy, Mike, from the start of their run. The twins grow uneasy, saying he stood nearby for a short time, quietly watching them. Joe starts to suspect that it really was Mike. He explains that several fruits are scattered around and tells them about their dangerous effect. The girls also begin to suspect that someone deliberately spread them. Joe is not fully certain it was Mike, but he knows for sure they must be extra careful around strangers. At that moment, behind one of the trees, the masked killer watches the group. Joe senses his presence, but only for an instant, as the figure vanishes immediately. The story jumps back a few moments earlier. Mike wanders through the forest, searching for stronger opponents. He is bored with the routine slaughter of weak enemies. Suddenly, he notices Joe's group, the girls talking about their brother. They call him strong enough, which instantly catches Mike's interest. An idea sparks in his mind that Joe might have returned to the past and now knows all the broken tricks. Forming a plan, Mike decides to eliminate his rival immediately. Meanwhile, Joe walks through the forest with the map in hand. He keeps a casual inner exchange with the gods, who keep pushing him to accept a contract. Joe refuses every single time. Suddenly, his perception jumps to a new level. He begins to sense the smell of human blood. Turning around, the hero activates Fate Theft. After a short search, he finds what looks like a corpse, yet the dead body counter reads 0. Joe ignites his flame blade and lunges forward. The masked stranger springs up instantly, realizing his trick has been exposed. He points out that the person on the ground should be checked for life, not finished off. The masked killer is shocked by Joe's speed, as a single strike shatters his mask. He questions how the hero recognized him and removes the mask himself. Activating a murderous drive, Mike charges straight at the hero. Joe notices that Mike's stats have skyrocketed since their last encounter. The fight has suddenly become far more difficult. Joe is disturbed by this bloodlust, as Mike looks almost happy. It seems killing demons alone is no longer enough for him. He has been granted a power that only activates through the murder of another human. So, leaving that power unused would have been straight up stupid. Joe is irritated by Mike's blatant hypocrisy. Suddenly, the opponent starts breaking apart into the air. Joe activates heightened senses. The enemy has a solid ability, one that might have worked against someone else. Feeling a hostile aura at his back, the hero spins around and blocks the strike. The foe pretends to be disappointed at being noticed while sizing Joe up. The stranger is thrilled, thinking this kill will be fun since Joe is no weak extra. Before the fight even ends, he imagines how much stronger he will become by beating Joe. At that moment, Joe realizes it is time to use the skill stolen from the Yeti. Combat instinct ignites his battle hunger, granting boosts when facing stronger foes. Joe activates the ability. The system reports the enemy is stronger, and a fierce craving for battle boils inside him. The opponent is stunned, never expecting hidden power like this. Now Joe is strong enough to truly challenge him. Little by little, the hero starts losing control during the clash. His aura surges far beyond all safe limits. He attacks with magic, briefly losing himself to rising madness. The stranger wounds Joe, but the hero shows zero reaction. Fear grips the enemy as the balance tilts hard in Joe's favor. Suddenly, Mike bursts from the forest, rushing in. Joe gets distracted and notices his friend. But madness clouds his mind, and he cannot recognize him. He feels excited that a stronger presence has entered the battlefield and abandons his last target. The hero charges forward. Mike stays calm, already prepared to counter every strike. At the same time, he calculates a winning plan. In a sharp move, he drops his sword and slams a fist into Joe's jaw. Joe crashes to the ground. Mike is pleased to have subdued a temporary threat. Meanwhile, the stranger Joe fought moments ago flees into the distance. After a while, Joe regains consciousness. Ignoring Mike's non-stop chatter, he downs a healing item. He asks his companion to check on others. Mike is annoyed that Joe avoids him, believing everyone else is just background noise. They lack stories and power to stand against them. In his view, they must become best allies to keep growing stronger. Mike offers Joe, still on the ground, to team up. At the same time, the fleeing stranger escapes the battlefield without dropping invisibility. He cannot understand how such a massive power gap appeared. Suddenly, he spots the group he traveled with earlier. A plan sparks in his mind, and he prepares to grow stronger. He drops invisibility and runs toward the group, waving his arms. He claims he searched everywhere and spotted a criminal. Suddenly, he collapses, writhing in pain. The group rushes to help him. He lifts his head, thanking them. In the next instant, he draws a weapon and attacks his own allies. Soon, none of his group remain alive, and the villain absorbs 10% of their stats. He suddenly gains a necklace, and the horror of the living and the dead is satisfied with his actions. His new diamond necklace boosts his power by 10%. He feels hyped, convinced that taking Joe down will now be easy. Suddenly, rain starts pouring, thick with condensed water energy. Water energy lowers his stats, but as a fire-type fighter, Joe should be drained even harder. All that remains is to find Joe before the rain intensifies. Meanwhile, Joe is training, cutting down trees without pause. Tree after tree falls, until only a few remain at the forest edge. As Joe raises his blade for the last tree, his invisible enemy swings a katana from behind. Joe unexpectedly blocks the strike. The attacker cannot grasp what just happened. The enemy launches another assault. Joe's sword cannot handle the pressure and snaps apart. The man mocks Joe, convinced he is now too weak to fight back. Yet no matter the gap in strength, Joe keeps deflecting every attack. If the enemy truly knew how weak Joe was, he would not have slaughtered so many people. He recalls Joe's missing partner and sees Joe wandering alone, as if provoking himself into killing. Suddenly, he notices Joe smiling, which only fuels his rage. Then something completely unexpected happens. Joe strikes back with fresh force, as if he had been holding back to avoid ending things too fast. The hero switches his attribute to water. The interface shows his reduced stats snapping back to normal. On top of that, they surge by another 10%. The enemy is stunned since the amulet promised Joe would stay weakened. The villain turns to the god who granted the amulet, demanding answers for the betrayal. Joe himself wonders why such a cautious foe trusted a random artifact. Suddenly, the horror of the living and the dead warns the enemy not to fall for Joe's bait. Even with boosted stats, the opponent is still stronger. Joe senses something is off. The rival leaps aside, confident in his superiority despite the attribute shift. With a single blow, he shatters Joe's weapon. Joe's chances of victory drop to nearly zero. The villain slams him back against a tree trunk. Disarmed and dazed, Joe is completely helpless. The katana presses to his head as the enemy mocks him and promises death for Joe's friends. He adds that Joe will not die alone. Suddenly, Joe counterattacks with a blade hidden in his sleeve. The weapon pierces straight through the enemy's stomach. The advantage instantly flips. The foe forgot that the branch lodged in his wound came from the cursed grove. As death closes in, the villain begs his god for salvation. Joe coldly notes that it is already too late. The connection to the horror of the living and the dead is severed. Joe reveals that his power only activates through killing. He uses fate theft. After the battle, the hero continues gathering spirit pearls. Rewards from the demonic dimension exceed all expectations. His search leaves a trail of felled trees behind him. He even has to build a makeshift lightning rod. Joe also absorbs several of his enemy's skills. His fate level rises once again. Mana keeps making itself known more often, swelling with every surge. This time it hits as a crushing headache, loud and relentless. Suddenly, someone calls out to him. Mike finds him and questions the mass slaughter of creatures and the fate of the enemy. Joe recalls his recent rage, realizing Mike caused him to lose track of the killer. Pulling himself together, he assigns the guy a task. After comparing maps to get oriented, Joe orders Mike to guard another sector and cut off any escape routes. Days pass with no news or action, and Mike returns asking about progress. Joe says the enemy was never found, so he focused on gathering pearls. Mike is convinced the foe was killed, judging by the trophies. The gear taken from the body makes it especially obvious. Joe denies it, claiming the sword came from the shop and the enemy vanished on his own. Mike still doubts him, but backs off. He keeps pushing, saying Joe could just admit the kill. Joe only stares at him in silence. Repeating that he killed no one, Joe reminds him they are not friends. Mike leaves, supposedly returning to pearl farming. Joe watches him go, uneasy at how easily he gave up. Pulling out the final pearl, Joe completes the trial. Outside, Bomb and Gel keep chasing Joe, begging him to take them as students. Each time, he calmly refuses without hesitation. The girls promise discipline and effort, even buying him coffee. Suddenly, one claims they are blessed by gods and cannot be weak. Joe activates fate detection. Bomb is blessed by the Maiden of the Hunt and the Moon. Gel is blessed by Tethva, bathed in sunlight. Joe relaxes, knowing such gods boost their stats well. He unexpectedly suggests they seek help from their gods instead of him. Confused, they ask which god has blessed him. Joe has no divine patron at all. No god has ever offered him a contract. The girls refuse to believe gods would ignore someone like him. One starts explaining the synergy between gods and humans. The other abruptly covers her mouth. Joe keeps dodging the topic, saying he does not need that info yet and has no rush to mentor anyone. The girls sense something off. There must be a reason he keeps rejecting divine contracts. Suddenly, a figure emerges from the winter portal. The man is so exhausted he collapses right after crossing the threshold. The stranger asks if he has entered the first room. Seating the priest on a pedestal, the group asks what happened to him. He admits he still cannot bring himself to kill monsters. The father fears even facing them, let alone fighting. He tried, but failed to defeat even the weakest beast. Under the stunned gazes of the girls, Joe offers raid assistance, flashing a calm, businesslike smile at the priest. The man looks at Joe with hope, unsure how to respond. The girls want to join, but Joe sends them off to hunt. The twins vanish from sight since Joe promised to consider their involvement later. The father calls himself dead weight, but Joe acts just like someone he once knew in his past life. He states that heroes are meant to back each other up, no matter how rough it gets. Those words break the priest, tears spilling out uncontrollably. Joe suggests wasting no time and heading straight into the raid. Meanwhile, back at the office, the staff notice the boss is in an unusually good mood. He explains that someone from their department cleared the room first. That single fact lifts his spirits sky high. Suddenly, his smile twists into a vicious grin. A girl he calls a princess appears at the doorway, arriving to congratulate him on the successful raid. She casually mentions that next time the second and third zones will collide. Out of nowhere, the girl proposes a bet. The wager is about who reaches the next hall on the highest difficulty first. Only one student may participate, either hers or his. Asked about the stakes, she makes it clear the prize is a favor. Irritated, he fires back with absolute confidence in his student's victory. After exchanging farewells, the girl leaves. A heavy silence settles over the hall. The boss angrily asks if the staff heard everything that was just said. Winning is no longer optional. Elsewhere, Joe helps the Holy Father gather pearls. He collects a full 1,000 pearls for him. The priest cannot believe the hero pulled it off in just 2 days. In gratitude, he heals Joe, since it is the only help he can offer. When it is done, the father drops to his knees, crushed by his own sense of uselessness. Joe encourages him, reminding him that everyone's value reveals itself in time. Those words only bring more tears to the priest's eyes. After clearing one room, the pair moves on to another, with Joe warning that it will be tougher. The first team entered 5 days ago, so departure is set for tomorrow. The next day, they step through the portal and emerge by the sea. The view is cinematic, with mountains rising far on the horizon. They are informed of a special condition in this room. Reward scale with user level, the shop is forbidden, and leaving before completion is impossible. Joe realizes the third rule will be a real headache. Victory conditions are unclear, meaning pure improvisation is required. Asked about the phrase to find and expose the secrets, Joe answers cryptically that it means ripping out tongues. After some time, the hero sets up a small camp for their stay. The father admits he panicked upon seeing the extra rules, but now feels safe since Joe prepared everything in advance. Suddenly, Joe announces he is going for a walk and asks the priest to wait at camp. As he moves, Joe reflects that one task is done, the camp issue solved. Food now becomes the real concern. The forest outskirts feel oddly artificial, like oversized toys. The food supply is guarded by several demon dogs. No one from the unknown group dares to approach them. Suddenly, the man who once came to Joe with May declares in fury that he will not return to camp. He cannot bring himself to ask help from someone who rejected him. Even the thought of it drives him insane when the memory resurfaces. His companions dislike the plan, but he sends them off again while he stays hidden. Still, he orders them into battle anyway, reminding himself he is paying them for this. The monsters turn out far weaker than expected. Before long, every demon dog lies dead. The heroes climb trees to start harvesting apples. Suddenly, the man notices that the dogs look unusually skinny, even though food is everywhere around them. A god's voice echoes in his head, declaring that anyone who eats an apple without permission will lose their tongue. Out of nowhere, a heavy rumble rises behind the group as demon monkeys come charging straight at them. They look starving, feral, and pissed off beyond reason. The man yells for the group to run as fast as they can. The group breaks into a sprint. Since the others are physically stronger, they easily outpace him, leaving him behind as bait for the monkeys. One monkey grabs the man and prepares to bite down. Suddenly, something steals the creature's attention. A katana pierces the monkey, killing it instantly and saving the man pinned beneath its weight. Out of nowhere, Steve appears, standing over him with a calm smile after the rescue. The man recognizes him at once as the same guy who once predicted he would never have a chance with May. He snaps that no one asked for help and starts driving the kid away. In a rage, the man reminds Joe of his supposed guilt. The hero responds coldly that he never planned to help him in the first place. He casually wonders if it might be time for the man to start running. Suddenly, one of the man's teammates rushes over. He apologizes for fleeing earlier and not noticing that the man had fallen. The man ignores him completely, cursing Joe in his mind and swearing never to forgive him. Meanwhile, Joe is locked in battle with an entire pack of monkeys. Gradually, by blending katana techniques with magic, he wipes out every last one. Now that no one is around, Joe can finally feed the egg. The egg opens its mouth in delight at the massive pile of roasted monkey meat. Instead, Joe casually slips it an apple. The hero himself prepares to eat the monkey meat. He checks whether the father still remembers his promise. Joe bites into the roasted meat. Slowly savoring the taste, he chews it down. Suddenly, he informs the holy man that monster flesh contains poison. He asks to be healed. The father gives him mana-restoring tea. After some time, Joe eats another small piece of meat while the father continues healing him. The priest cannot understand why Joe is putting himself through this and begs him to stop. Joe abruptly says the healing can end as he has finally adapted to the poison. Now it is time to get used to raw meat. Not long after, Joe gains poison resistance. At last, he has what he wanted and can stop. The Holy Father collapses to the ground, completely exhausted. He spent too much energy healing and asks Joe never to use poison like this again. Suddenly, Joe starts waking the father. He had planned to let him rest, since he worked more than enough. In an instant, Joe draws his katana and strikes at someone unseen. Joe informs the father that they have visitors. Several men are creeping toward the tent. Joe knew they would show up eventually. Preparing for battle, he instructs the Holy Father not to leave the tent, promising to handle everything himself. When Joe steps out, he stuns the attackers, who expected everyone to be asleep. One of them says they will leave if Joe's group hands over their food. As he readies himself to fight, Joe recalls how a conflict with the first group ended horribly in his past life. He asks what will happen if he refuses. Suddenly, the group lunges forward, choosing violence as they try to take the food by force. A short but brutal brawl breaks out. Joe effortlessly deals with the first attacker. Grabbing him by the head, he smashes it hard against his knee. Joe starts wondering why such a strong group cannot secure food on their own. Maybe they are just itching for trouble. Another attacker rushing in manages to warn the others that Joe is way too strong. They decide to pull back and report everything to their captain. Suddenly, some kind of sphere flies toward Joe. An explosion erupts nearby, throwing a pillar of dust into the sky. Meanwhile, the holy man remains seated inside the tent. He suddenly notices the explosion outside. The father instantly rushes to help the hero, but he stops himself at the last second, remembering Joe's warning. Maybe that was exactly why Joe told him to stay safe. The priest hesitates, afraid to step outside. Suddenly, the tent flap is thrown open. Joe stands there, the enemies having escaped using smoke bombs. The hero explains that the attackers tried to steal their food. Joe warns the holy man not to associate with people from other groups. The priest recoils in fear, thinking Joe should never have taken him along. He feels like nothing but dead weight to the hero. Joe places a hand on the father's shoulder, reminding him of his own teachings. Right now, people rely on totems and medicine. After proper training, everything will change. People will realize the true value of potions and seek out the holy man often. Joe will fight, and the priest will heal. Joe confidently states that the priest will save countless lives in the future. Inspired by these words, the father declares that he cannot afford to give up. He asks Joe to help him grow stronger. Together, they will become a perfect team, supporting each other. 3 days pass, and the story shifts to May's camp. The twins enter her tent, cloaked in leaves. May is happy to see Bomb and Gel back and asks if they found what they were looking for. They found nothing, meaning they will have to venture deeper into the forest. May warns that such a journey will be harsh, as most people in the camp are weak. The twins believe that if they go with Joe, everything will work out, and they can learn a lot on the way. But the hero is likely already deep in the forest, so they must act without him. The girls ask May when Joe will return, but she has no answer. Suddenly, someone knocks on the tent. The entrance opens, and May's name is called. Mike shows up to visit and asks if they have seen Joe. Disappointed that it is not the person she was hoping for, May says she has not seen him. The twins are amazed that Joe managed to bypass every trap. May asks why Mike came, but he already states his reason. He believed Joe would be here, since the gods hinted at this place. Mike keeps calling himself and Joe the main characters, while labeling everyone else as side characters. He also hints that the camp is full of useless people. May grows angry at how casually he looks down on others. Suddenly, he tosses her an apple known as the Fruit of Passion. She receives a notification that the room on low difficulty has been cleared. Mee is not surprised at all, since she already has plenty of her own apples. Mike is caught off guard by this turn of events. Now, he does not mind working with the girls as a team. The twins, however, are far from thrilled by his proposal and have zero desire to cooperate with him. Mike then concludes that it looks like persuasion might have to be done the hard way. May stops him immediately, urging him to cut it out while there is still time. The warning has absolutely no effect on Mike. He draws his weapon, deciding that a clash with the girl would be way more interesting. Sensing the tension, the twins step in and suggest everyone calm down and lower their weapons. Suddenly, one of the camp girls bursts into the tent, reporting that someone nearby is cooking monster meat. Everyone inside freezes, stunned by such news. Mike lights up with excitement, convinced that coming to the camp was the right move. At the same time, not far away, a cauldron bubbles over with rich, savory food. The aroma spreads for miles, thick and impossible to ignore. All the others have left only fruit from the garden, animals, and poisonous plants to eat. But since Joe developed poison resistance early on, he can now eat as much as he wants. Suddenly, he hears someone calling out nearby. Mike and May have followed the scent of meat. Joe is glad to see them, but they immediately try to forbid him from eating the meat. May warns that everything here is toxic, and anyone who eats it should drop dead on the spot. Joe explains that he neutralized the poison by adding an antidote to the soup. May is shocked, realizing that for the first time in ages, she has a chance to eat properly. However, the bowl meant for May is snatched by Mike, who gratefully takes the meal for himself. Joe asks him for 1,000 pearls as payment for the service. The pair are stunned that he is charging for food, yet they still do not refuse to eat. For May, Joe sets the price at 200 pearls. She serves herself a generous portion, while the rest of the team approaches from behind, having found them. Before long, the entire group is eating Joe's soup. Joe discusses plans with May while they search for high-rarity items. They were also hoping for Joe's direct support. Mike announces that he would like to have a hero like Joe on his team. This sparks a conflict between May and Mike over who gets to claim Joe. The man then suggests that everyone simply unite into a single group. Both sides immediately jump up, declaring they would rather act separately. Time moves forward a bit, and the heroes gather beneath one large canopy. Mee reports a surge of people arriving from the first zone, forcing them into fights almost every encounter. Joe is surprised by this information and decides to personally deal with the situation in the first zone. He tells the priest that staying in the camp would be the safest option. The father, however, is convinced that he cannot abandon Joe. May agrees to accept the new companion for a while. Joe explains that the priest will be safe here and can better unlock his potential. Once the issue with the holy man is settled, Joe leaves to handle his own matters. Deep in the garden, a deity tells Joe that he has grown much stronger and urges him to venture deeper into the forest. Joe ignores the voice and continues eating apples instead. The hero activates heightened senses. Suddenly, he notices something massive in the distance. Someone managed to get incredibly close without him noticing at all. The question remains how such a gigantic monster could even exist here. At that very moment, a colossal ape attacks the hero. and Joe activates the ability known as Lone Man. He vanishes instantly, just as the massive orangutan is about to strike. Holding his breath, Joe uses the stolen ability to climb into a tree directly above the unsuspecting beast. Suddenly, the tree in the beast's grasp ignites, and Joe drops down in the same breath, striking as he falls. With a single clean swing, he cleaves the entire ape straight in half. It feels like he is slowly learning how to use high-grade items properly, since their combinations often lead to results like this. Yet right now, Joe has no clear idea what his next move should be. Should he trace where the ape came from, or finish securing the antidote first? The hero chooses the second path and heads off to gather blue apples. After eating several, he gains increased mana and experience, while also boosting his resistance to poison. Even the gods are shocked by how many he intends to consume, as he shows no sign of stopping and devours fruit after fruit. Gradually, the poison resistance ability evolves until it reaches the rank of a primary insect destiny. Joe exhales deeply, loosening his grip as several fruits slip from his hands. They accidentally drop onto travelers from the first zone passing below. The group recognizes Joe, yet they do not say where they know him from. Their leader expresses a desire to talk, inviting Joe to come along with them. Joe suspects that this might be the very man who organized the attack on the first day. Deciding to accept the invitation, the hero jumps down from the tree and joins the group. After some time, they lead him to their camp. There are twice as many people here as in his own zone. Many of them stare at Joe, but none of them look afraid. He is escorted to a large tent and guided inside. Their leader and boss greets him there. Joe recognizes him immediately. His name is Steve. In Steve's hands gleams a heavenly flaming sword of third-tier dragon rank. In a past life, they managed to reach the very end of clearing all realms, so Joe is not surprised. Joe asks the leader why he was summoned here. Steve suddenly lunges forward at lightning speed, pressing the blade to Joe's forehead. The hero shows no reaction at all. This outcome clearly surprises Steve. He gets straight to the point, inviting Joe to work for them. The offer does not impress the hero. It seems their camp has not even completed the advanced condition yet. Without valuing their proposal, Joe turns and leaves the tent, declaring that he intends to be the first to clear the territory. Several katanas suddenly block his path. It seems he will not be allowed to leave so easily, as multiple fighters aim their weapons at him. They inform him that he has no choice. If he refuses to help, he will die right here. The leader looks triumphant at the fighter who just so deftly restrained the strongest opponent. Joe responds by showing them his amulet, making it clear that any move against him would bring serious trouble. The leader recognizes the amulet as a symbol of vengeance. If Joe is killed, several powerful figures will hunt down the murderer. The prospect of becoming a target for such influential enemies terrifies the leader. Lowering his weapon with a heavy breath, he asks whether Joe received the message. A few days earlier, Joe did receive a notice about a trial for elite disciples, requiring the clearing of the Chamber of Hidden Sins on maximum difficulty. The reward would be granted upon success, and until then, the amulet was given to him. Suddenly, the boss shouts to draw the attention of the entire group. He warns them that Joe must not be killed. He also explains the amulet, stating that anyone who kills Joe will become prey to Avengers. Joe asks whether he is allowed to leave now. Without warning, the boss launches an attack, ordering his men to beat Joe but not kill him. The entire group rushes in as well. Joe anticipated this. If he were going to be trapped so easily, he would never have come here. He scatters the crowd in close combat. Activating invisibility, he begins to circle among his enemies. Unable to track him, they form a tight ring trying to prevent his escape. Suddenly, Joe reappears in plain sight, stunning one of the fighters with a clean hit. He instantly holds his breath again, slipping back into invisibility and continuing the silent assault. While hiding, the hero pulls out several fruits that lure beasts with their scent. He had always wondered why the first zone and his zone were locked in such bad blood. He sets several tents on fire and beasts rush in, drawn by the fruit's aroma. Joe calmly leaves the territory, but then remembers one more thing. He cannot allow everything to repeat itself just for the sake of a reward. Returning to his own camp, he pours out dozens of blue fruits and warns them about people from other zones. The previous night, Joe overheard plans of an ambush being prepared against their group. He offers the heroes a paradise aromatic fruit that allows the room to be cleared on medium difficulty. Many are confused as to why he is giving food away for free, especially after selling soup for 200 pearls. Joe says there is enough food for everyone and leaves before he changes his mind. A girl catches up to him, asking whether he plans to clear the room on medium difficulty. Joe turns around, questioning why it matters so much to her. After all, he is not even part of the team. Mi silently watches him walk away. Time moves forward. Joe stands alone near a plantation of blue fruits, lost in thought. Not long ago, he fought a massive ape. Yet monsters do not appear from nowhere. They are living beings native to their realms. The hero decides to track the macaque to learn where they come from. Following it, he reaches a large lie in a tree, inside which a violet liquid glimmers. Joe cannot grasp how such a huge ape managed to climb inside. As he reaches out, the hero suddenly begins to fall into the abyss. Reaching the bottom, he lights the path ahead with fire. At a bend in the passage, Joe freezes, stunned by the sight before him. A garden spreads out, with a tree of strange new leaves standing at its center. It seems no monsters live here at all. Joe approaches the tree to take a fruit, realizing this is the most dangerous place in the demon realm. He also notices another lie within the purple leaf tree itself. Plucking the fruit of all sense, the hero fulfills the condition to clear the chamber of hidden sins on high difficulty. Suddenly, an explosion roars behind him. The first group followed him down. It seems they had been tracking him. In the leader's hands hangs one of the twins. Joe realizes he has been completely outplayed. Shock makes him drop the fruit from his hand. The leader declares that if Joe cannot be killed, his allies will be instead. Pressing a weapon to the girl's throat, he proposes a trade, the fruit for her life. Joe has nothing to offer the leader. Pointing at the fruit on the ground, he allows them to take it themselves. The leader orders the others to gather the fruits. Joe, he will handle personally. The entire group rushes toward the tree, scrambling over each other. Meanwhile, the leader demands that Joe lower his weapon. Throwing the girl to the ground, he claims Joe can take her back if he dares. Joe discards his katana and approaches the girl. Checking that she is alive, he slips antidote petals into her mouth. The leader is puzzled by this move, as he never poisoned her. Before he can finish reacting, he hears his team falling from the tree. Turning around, he cannot understand what is happening. They lie on the ground, unable to move, vision blurred and head spinning hard. Blood spills from the leader's mouth as well. A system notice hits. The fighters inhaled the vapors of the fruit of all sense for too long. Joe looks down on the enemy with cold disdain, seeing the moment of realization land. Toxic fumes from the fruit blanket the entire area. The leader cannot grasp how the hero knew about this effect. In desperation, he lunges into an attack. Swinging his weapon wildly, he demands the antidote. Joe, holding the girl in his arms, is surprised the enemy is still conscious. Suddenly, Joe is wounded several times. A message flashes. The poison seeps through open wounds, flooding the body. Realizing time is running out, Joe chooses to retreat. He ignites the tree, intensifying the toxic vapors. The enemy cannot understand why the hero risks this, knowing it could kill him too. Drawing his blade, the leader decides only one will walk away. Joe executes the leader without mercy, leaving no room for survival. Had he known crossing the second zone was a bad move, he might still be breathing. Exhausted, Joe activates Death Theft. He forcibly gathers power from the fallen bodies. The watching gods cannot comprehend why he wastes power so freely. Feeding the egg several fruits, he pushes its progress to 100%. A Killin suddenly appears, stunning even the gods. The deer-like creature rushes toward the hero. It carries a powerful healing ability. Joe activates area purification. In an instant, the poisonous fumes disperse. The land is cleansed of the fruit's toxins. As Joe gathers the remaining fruits, the girl rises, clutching her head. Joe signals for her to come closer. Soon, Jel and the hero make their way back to the surface. Allies are already rushing toward them. Mei is overwhelmed with relief that her friend is alive. Joe asks what happened while he was gone. The girls explain that the priest healed everyone who was poisoned. The sister scolds the twin for running off alone. Joe explains she was taken by the captain of the first zone. Mei regrets not starting the search immediately. Joe reminds them this would not have happened if they had cleared the room on medium difficulty. But the girls could not leave him alone. Everyone here already sees him as part of the team. One of the girls suggests that next time they fight together. Joe is shaken as he realizes his fate is now intertwined with Mei's. A notification appears about newly crossed destinies. It is now too late to distance himself from the team he created. Joe exits the room after clearing the level on the highest difficulty. Rewards are distributed, and since Joe gave everything he had, his prize is fitting. The hero receives the Compass of Fate. It is meant to predict his future, yet he cannot activate it manually. Suddenly, it begins to glow with blue light. It seems to activate on its own, catching Joe completely off guard. Joe watches everything unfold in stunned silence, the moment hitting harder than expected. A system notice arrives, stating that his destiny has been altered. At the same time, back in the office, the boss scrolls through the results and notices something off. Joe's trial records are completely abnormal. He managed to clear the brutal Knife Mountain location in a single day. What happened in the Hall of Fire also looks suspicious. He even defeated a Yeti in a hidden area of the Ice Hall, and he pulled off all of this while holding a laughably low tertiary insectoid rank. Most likely, the disappearance of the sword from the Forest of Branches was also his doing. Even stranger, he defeated the leader of the first group, despite the princess handing that man a copy of the Celestial Flame Sword. Now the boss takes interest in the girl as well, since a fighter from their clan was the first to clear the level on the highest difficulty. He also recalls that Joe managed to raise a Killen. The odds of nurturing such a creature under natural conditions are close to zero. The boss decides to test the hero, suspecting that Joe might be able to read destinies. He immediately summons Joe. Choosing a clever approach, the boss claims he promised Joe a special reward and reveals a mysterious key. Joe is stunned by what the boss shows him. Dozens of legendary weapons hang on the wall, all stored within a pocket dimension the boss created himself. He allows the hero to choose any weapon he wants. It feels suspicious, as if the boss sensed something and is letting Joe choose far too easily. Joe steps closer to the wall and begins examining the options. He realizes the boss altered the weapon stats. Low-rank weapons now display the appearance and descriptions of god-tier artifacts, while high-rank ones look unimpressive. All of it is designed to test whether the hero can read destinies. Without that ability, determining a weapon's true class is impossible, as the descriptions are deliberately warped. Joe continues making his selection. It seems the boss removed the strongest items, yet a couple of Phantom-class weapons still remain. Joe notes the boss's apparent generosity. Suddenly, his attention is drawn to a beautifully crafted weapon in the corner. A solid-looking sword with clean lines, yet it carries only a basic primary rank. Joe feels thrown off. This is not what he expected at all. Suspicion creeps in as the weapon ranks feel wildly inconsistent. The hero activates his power detection ability. Thinking it through, Joe realizes the boss is testing him. Such elaborate measures only make sense if his skills are under scrutiny. Exhaling slowly, Joe understands he nearly walked into the trap. Only a handful of people can read destinies, and the agency keeps tight control over them. The hero hesitates, weighing whether to reveal his ability or keep it buried. The boss abruptly interrupts his thoughts, asking if the choice has been made. Joe turns and points toward his decision. The boss is shocked, seeing the finger aimed straight at him. Joe instantly realizes he has been misunderstood. The boss calls him clever. Flattered, He assumes Joe chose the most valuable thing in the room, the boss himself. Joe is left confused, realizing his intent was read completely wrong. He clarifies that he was pointing not at the boss, but at the key in his hand, the true access to the weapons. This way, the boss does not have to part with a single artifact in the room. The leader falls into deep thought. Time moves forward as Joe prepares to feed the Killen. He received the key, and copying it will take 3 days, time he plans to use to push the beast's growth as far as possible. Feeding the Killen costs 12,000 pearls, a straight-up brutal price. Still, the hero never cuts corners when it comes to his companion. Suddenly, he gains a new rank, Secondary Phantom, along with the ability to control water. Joe asks for a demonstration of the new power. The Keelan begins gathering water into a sphere, but it swells far beyond expectations. The hero panics and urges it to stop. The water slips out of control. It smashes straight through the wall, the raw force looking downright monstrous. Behind the wall is the room of the same man who once came to Joe for a session, now screaming in pure terror. Meanwhile, in the academy cafeteria, several students are having lunch. Many of them are sick of surviving on nothing but vegetables and fruit, missing the soup Joe used to sell. One of them suddenly remarks that Joe first seemed cold, but once you talk to him, he turned out to be a solid guy. The others start backing that up with their own praise. Once, his team got surrounded by beasts, and he charged in without hesitation to save them. Joe himself appears in the hallway, quietly listening, then mentions that he is glad they enjoyed the room. Entering the cafeteria, he notices the man who once came with May and offers to pay for his meal. Turns out that man was the first to clear the room of hidden sins on low difficulty. Joe understands why he had not seen him for a while, though the man looks satisfied with the result. Soon, the conversation turns fake and boastful. Out of nowhere, the man suggests grabbing a drink. Without waiting, he demands 2 servings from the attendant. The attendant refuses to serve alcohol on credit. The man has no money, and Joe steps in. That pushes the man over the edge. The hero tells him to calm down. Joe learns that as a VIP client, he can get drinks for free. That privilege unlocked after spending 12,000 pearls in one go. He orders drinks for both of them. The man is stunned by Joe's generosity. Jealousy twists his face as he bites his lip. Suddenly, he smashes a glass and starts yelling, demanding to know who Joe really is. Bomb and Gel, eating nearby, jump up in alarm. Joe snaps, demanding an explanation. The man shouts back and storms out. The girls ask if that was his friend, but Joe denies it. The twins wonder why he was there, and Joe explains he just dropped by. Suddenly, the girls notice the hero's new pet. They find it adorable. Joe admits he never picked a name and just calls it a Killen. Bomb suggests the name Leanie, and the creature's rank instantly rises. The hero is stunned by the sudden evolution. The girls proudly demand credit for it. Joe thanks them. The twins insist that he take them into the next room. Joe pauses, wondering if they are not meant to go together anyway. Time shifts back by a week. The Viper Room opens, with a mission to protect a certain object, though the details remain unclear. A masked stranger steps out of a container, declaring himself the master of the room. Joe is confused, since in his past life, a different figure stood here. The stranger explains that the task is to protect the snakes by binding them with special fabric. Each fighter is set to receive a mark of binding once the condition is fulfilled. The crowd scatters, fanning out to hunt for snakes across the zone. Some already secure their targets, while others are locked in messy struggles. The protection phase will last 168 hours, and every snake must be given a name. Joe wanders in thought, trying to decode the warning pulsing from the compass of fate. This life has stacked up way too many differences compared to the last one. On a bridge, he suddenly hears the voices of gods again, but he shuts them out without a second thought. Ripping off his shirt, the hero dives straight into the river. Strange creatures drift beneath the surface. Joe studies the underwater life, noticing there are way more of them than expected. Thanks to the water attribute, his lung capacity increases by 20%. His beast activates its water control ability. That power transfers to Joe, letting him move freely and breathe underwater like it is nothing. The hunt for a snake begins. Suddenly, he spots something nearby that looks suspiciously like one. Joe bolts toward a gorge, acting as if he is fleeing the snake, leaving the watching gods completely confused. They insist there are no snakes down there, but Joe did not come here just for snakes alone. Out of nowhere, a great serpent appears behind him, a massive presence radiating hostility. Joe jams his weapon straight into the monster's maw to avoid being swallowed whole. Luck is on his side, since he brought the celestial sword, his only real long-range option. The creature is too big for a snake and too small for a dragon. Grabbing the serpent by its tongue, Joe moves to attach the mark of binding. Snatching his scarf, he starts wrapping it tightly around the tongue. Suddenly, a blue glow flares deep in the serpent's throat, like an attack charging up. The serpent strikes, blasting Joe out of its mouth. He fails to secure the scarf in time. The serpent goes berserk, its eyes blazing red with fury. Joe orders his beast to protect him. The serpent lunges at Lenny, but Joe plays it smart. While Lenny draws the monster's focus, the hero slips to its tail and fastens the red scarf there. The great serpent thrashes, resisting the binding mark. Joe grips the tail with everything he has, refusing to let the scarf come loose. After a tense struggle, he finally subdues the serpent. Joe points upward, signaling that it is time to head back to land. Wrapping an arm around the serpent's neck, he rockets out of the water. Joe praises his new companion, knowing he must protect it for an entire week. Still, looking at the terrifying creature, he is confident it could handle itself just fine. The serpent gives Joe a questioning glance and dives back into the depths. Joe declares a full week of vacation for himself. Instead of resting, he immediately sprints off to wipe out local beasts. His power level climbs to 26. Even with that gain, he knows pushing his stats further will only get harder, despite his higher class. He tells Lenny he is taking a short break. Joe pulls several pearls from the fallen monsters, noticing that Lenny clearly cannot stand the sight of blood. Suddenly, something catches Joe's attention. Sensing trouble, he breaks into a run toward the source. Reaching a waterfall, he stops and waits. Screams echo from below. Stepping to the cliff's edge, Joe takes in the scene beneath him. Several men are arguing below, and among them is a familiar face, the same guy who was beaten not long ago. It looks like the group of men starts rebelling against their own boss, fed up with him constantly ranting about Joe. The hero watches the whole scene in silence from above, completely detached. The gods whisper suggestions, offering Joe a deal to work under the man, hinting that money is what he lacks most. Suddenly, the man below, left on his own, finally notices the hero. He asks Joe to help his snake. The two break into a run as if the snake is under attack, but the man can do nothing since he already lost track of it. Joe asks what the reward will be for the help, and the man reminds him that he never paid for lunch. The hero stops cold, refusing to move an inch, making it clear he does not work for free. The man offers 2,000 pearls. After receiving the pearls, Joe seals the contract. He rushes to help the man's snake, which is indeed under attack. An unknown guy is senselessly killing the snake. Joe starts blocking his attacks, shielding the bound creature. The stranger is annoyed, insisting Joe should go find another snake since this one was his first. Joe tosses the injured snake toward the running owner and takes a fighting stance. The man catches his pet, which is barely clinging to life. Furious, he demands to know why someone would attack another person's snake. The attacker seems genuinely unaware that the snake belonged to someone. The others are just as shocked that he knows nothing about binding marks. It turns out the guy has a completely different mission, one that requires killing snakes. That revelation stuns both Joe and the man. Joe recalls that in his past life, the third zone had a different objective. Back then, both zones protected snakes together, fighting monsters as allies. That realization hits hard, meaning his serpent cannot be left to defend itself anymore. Suddenly, Joe receives an alert that his bound serpent is under attack. At that very moment, his bonded creature is indeed being assaulted. The stranger realizes he has found exactly what he was looking for and prepares for battle. He strikes at the giant serpent just moments away from completing his task. Joe steps into the fight, launching an attack, but the enemy narrowly dodges. The stranger counters, yet Joe blocks the blow cleanly. Joe realizes he knows this opponent and always suspected he would be the one to strike. The attacker is stunned that his assault was stopped. In Joe's past life, this man was part of the Flying Tiger clan, the same clan Joe once belonged to. He had even invited Joe to a party on that very fateful day. Joe feels a strange sense of relief seeing him alive here. The man, named Sam, claims he will let Joe's attitude slide, but insists Joe step aside since he has plans for the monster. Joe orders the serpent to hide as deep underwater as possible and not surface. Sam explodes with rage as his prey slips away. He demands Joe back off and let him finish off the worm. Joe only smiles foolishly, sensing a completely different vibe from the young Sam. In his past life, Joe only knew Sam's older self, calm and calculating. They likely would never have become friends if they had met here back then. Joe suggests Sam should just find another snake since this great serpent is already taken. Sam is shocked that Joe calls the serpent his own. He decides to deal with Joe first and launches an attack. Joe dodges the strike, drawing genuine surprise from his opponent. Even while evading, Joe feels the pressure, as every blow from Sam forces him to fight at full throttle. Sam grows irritated seeing his opponent smiling mid-fight. Joe finds the situation genuinely amusing. How could he not be happy, facing a comrade who is alive once more, as he switches his water attribute to fire? Sam carries a ghost-tier fate of the secondary rank, placing him above the hero in both class and raw stats. The hero starts laughing at his rival, almost mocking the fact that someone far stronger seems frozen, unable to put him down. Sam snaps and charges in fury, but Joe already looks like he has a plan locked in. After gaining the upper hand, Joe watches his opponent doubled over in pain, barely catching his breath before retreating with threats. Waving him off with dry irony, Joe starts thinking about what this victory might cost him. His current path is drifting away from his past life, and that could mean never rejoining the Flying Tiger clan. As evening falls, participants complain about not being warned of interzone hunting, but the green-haired disguiser shuts them down, claiming there is no difference between defending against monsters or people. An irritated man takes his snake and leaves, while Joe questions the disguiser about the logic behind pitting trainees against each other. The answer comes cold and clear. It is a filtration system meant to remove the underqualified and those who rely on others to carry them through rooms. On top of that, there simply are not enough snakes this time. Not everyone can protect one, so this system exists to keep everyone occupied. Suddenly, Joe hears the gods again, sounding almost nostalgic, hinting that something happened while he was gone. No alert ever came about an attack on the serpent. Still, he feels something closing in and starts preparing for a fight. A small explosion erupts in the distance, kicking a column of dust into the sky. The shockwave slams Joe sideways. It is Sam, who finally tracked him down, clearly having unfinished business. The guy raises his hands into a fighting stance. He lunges forward, ready to settle what he promised to deal with later. Joe blocks the strike, fully familiar with his opponent's habits and not overly worried. Then the unexpected happens. Instead of a left-hand attack, Sam spins and strikes with a kick. Joe barely manages to defend at the last moment, realizing his opponent changed his patterns once they were figured out. Joe is impressed, knowing how hard it is to rewrite one's own combat instincts. Sam is pleased that he finally managed to land real damage. Joe questions the reason for the fight, since Sam could simply find another snake, only to realize Sam is driven by the fact that he lost last time. That outcome is something Sam cannot accept. Joe is genuinely surprised. In his past life, Sam also loved challenging opponents stronger than himself. After a moment of thought, Joe calms down, realizing it would be stupid to celebrate the fact that they are enemies now. He puts his trust in his opponent, knowing that if he loses, his serpent will die. All he asks is that Sam does not die, as the hero's sword ignites. Joe also activates the combat instinct skill. His vision blurs and control starts slipping away. Sam charges again. Joe is already ready, deflecting the assault. He enjoys fighting opponents stronger than himself. Each strike fails to truly threaten him as he slips past an elbow blow. Joe grabs Sam's arm, lining up a counterattack. Sam dodges the sword strike, though not perfectly, still taking a glancing hit. Joe remains exhilarated, slowly losing control in the thrill of battle. Sam is shocked by what he is witnessing. The man before him is not the same one he fought yesterday. This opponent has somehow grown far stronger and looks almost unhinged. If this pace continues, Sam's chances of losing keep climbing. Gathering everything he has, Sam slams a powerful attack straight into Joe's chest. The sheer force shatters several of Joe's bones. Joe crashes to the ground while Sam stands over him, unsure what to do next. The hero feels an overwhelming urge to kill, completely out of control. Suddenly, the combat instinct skill evolves to Ghost Tier secondary rank, briefly restoring his sanity. Relieved to have his mind back, Joe blocks the next incoming attack. Sam is stunned by how his opponent has changed yet again. In the next heartbeat, the hero's body ignites, heat rippling through the air. Joe makes it clear that he has been running scenarios in his head, thinking through every possible way to put his rival down. Sam is shaken, unable to process how the hero is still moving after taking multiple broken bones. Joe charges once more, attacking with a wide grin carved across his face, pure battle high leaking through. After a while, Sam lies beaten on the ground, battered and spent. It looks like he has lost again. Joe is lucky the match ends right there, as his combat instinct skill shuts down from mana depletion. The flame control skill also fades, and Joe makes it clear that Sam will live. He demands that Sam leave his serpent alone and find another target instead. Sam, however, swears to return the next day, and if that fails, the day after, repeating it until he wins. Joe warns him not to grind himself into dust like that. Sometime later, Joe heads back to base, preparing to step into the portal. He knows Sam will not abandon his obsession, yet Joe cannot allow either of them to truly lose. Exiting the portal into the hall, he notices several people surrounding the masked girl, furious that the third zone only needs to kill a few snakes. The girl calmly explains that the second group's task was to protect the snakes, and they failed. Joe sits down to rest, healing his wounds while listening to the ongoing arguments. Suddenly, an interesting idea clicks in his mind. He calls Inspector Anabai over. Joe leans in and quietly lays out his plan near her ear. She answers with a mysterious smile. She confirms that the plan is entirely possible. Now Joe has one more reason why losing is not an option. After some time, he enters the portal again, heading out to hunt for a bit. Day after day, Sam keeps attacking him. Each time, Sam loses again and again, unable to accept it. Little by little, only a few days remain to keep watch over the serpent. Sam questions why Joe insists on fighting fair while setting his own body on fire. Joe makes it clear that he uses his abilities whenever and however he wants. Sam retreats from the battlefield once more, defeated again, and vowing to return tomorrow. The Great Serpent, watching all this, probably thinks both of them are a little unhinged. Suddenly, Joe notices the serpent on the surface, confused since he ordered it to stay underwater. It turns out the serpent is simply hungry. Joe feeds it expensive food from the cafeteria, instructing it to head back down once it finishes eating. After feeding the serpent, he signals that it can go. At that moment, the twins Bomb and Yell rush up, curious about what he has been doing here. He explains that he was feeding his great serpent, which sparks clear jealousy in the girls. They also notice his bruised face, clearly Sam's doing, though Joe has no intention of stopping their fights. The girls do not believe him, as this behavior feels unlike him. From the water, Joe's serpent quietly watches the group. Nearby, a small group of guys ask Sam for help dealing with the second group, but he is reluctant, focused on settling his own score. One of them reassures him, claiming to know a way to defeat Joe. All the while, the serpent observes them from afar. Hearing a strange bubbling sound nearby, Sam turns his head but sees no serpent. He asks the man how such a plan could even work. Joe stands on the shore facing his serpent. Today is the final day he must protect it. At the same time, Sam approaches from the forest, and Joe wonders what will happen if Sam loses again. Sam is fully intent on winning this time, absolutely refusing to take another loss. Joe only laughs at him, completely unfazed. Joe proposes a wager, framing it as their final clash, where victory would grant the right to demand a single wish from the loser. The opponent wonders what happens if he wins, but Joe, already coiling to strike, makes it clear that such an outcome is not on the table. Sam is irritated by that level of confidence. He settles into a combat stance, muscles tightening as he prepares to attack. Sam launches forward, convinced that the hero's usual techniques will no longer work on him. He tears through Joe's flaming shield, pressing the assault. Joe manages to block the blow, stunned at the thought that his opponent might have broken through fire itself. The hero activates his fate-reading ability. It becomes clear that Sam has gained fire resistance. Sam is certain of victory now, believing the hero has lost his greatest weapon. Then something completely unexpected happens. Joe reactivates his battle-focused ability and draws a lightning blade. With that, the tide clearly shifts in his favor. Sam notices the change in Joe immediately. It becomes obvious that the hero had been hiding an ace all along. Still, Sam wonders whether Joe truly believes only one of them has hidden abilities. A shapeless spear forms in Sam's hand. Joe receives a warning from his senses, screaming danger. Even the gods recognize the spear, identifying it as divine weaponry. Sam attacks without hesitation. The spear hurtles toward Joe at extreme speed. Against all odds, the hero deflects the devastating strike. A message flashes, announcing that Joe's combat instinct has been canceled. Joe is furious, knowing this is the worst possible moment for that skill to drop, and he immediately forces it back online. Today, no matter the cost, he must win. Joe's combat instinct ascends to ghostly first rank. A strange yellow glow becomes visible to him. After a moment's thought, he realizes it represents attack trajectories. He can now see exactly where Sam intends to strike. Deflecting attacks suddenly becomes far easier. Joe charges straight at his rival. Sam is stunned, wondering how many hidden skills Joe actually has. In a blink, Joe appears behind him. Sam is wounded by the strike, unable to endure it fully. He collapses to the ground, powerless to continue. Joe deactivates his combat instinct and regains clarity. He realizes with horror that he nearly killed his friend. Panicking, the hero rushes toward him, determined to carry him to the Holy Father for healing. Suddenly, a bullet whizzes past Joe. Nearby, the third group, which had been lying in ambush, finally launches their attack. Joe prepares to down a healing potion before the fight. The potion suddenly slips from his hand. Somehow, the hero ends up slammed into the dirt. It seems someone in the group possesses an earth-based ability. Joe now has to fight his way free. His fire control ability shuts down due to depleted mana. Panic grips him as he scrambles to figure out his next move. Out of nowhere, his serpent appears again, striking the attackers. They can do nothing against the majestic beast. They do not even understand what kind of creature stands before them. Joe is no less stunned than his enemies, amazed that, apparently, nobody bothered to read the manual. Now it seems he has to protect the serpent too, the exact scenario he feared, meaning he must stay underwater. The main rule in the manual clearly states that the great serpent must never be called a snake. The group of men slowly realizes that this terrifying creature belongs to Joe. Joe urges the opponents to back off. Suddenly, they notice something strange happening to him. Joe watches in shock as the great serpent, once labeled a snake, loses its chance to ever become a dragon. Rage and resentment flood the creature. As a result, it transforms into a ganchori, a monster resembling a twisted dragon. Joe realizes he might have had a chance if the enemies had truly understood what it was. Ganchori unleashes its fury on everyone nearby. The group gathers the survivors and flees in panic. Even the gods are stunned, having never witnessed a Ganchori before. Ganchori is a fallen great serpent that failed to become a dragon, wielding poison and breathing fire. The half-dragon rampages wildly, attacking everything in sight. One masked defender announces through a megaphone that an unforeseen situation has occurred. A dragon-type monster, Ganchori, has appeared. Wherever the monster moves, forest fires erupt. The Fate Protection Agency orders an evacuation to the sacred tree for everyone's safety. People rush toward the tree while May shields as many as she can from the flames using her abilities. Joe also retreats, Sam slung over his back, certain the agency must step in now. Suddenly, the green-haired man announces a new agency mission. Killing Ganchori will count as clearing the task. Meanwhile, Mike listens from beneath a protective dome to the announcement. It feels like the moment for a boss raid has arrived. After some time, most participants gather near the tree. Joe looks around, wondering if the Holy Father is present. He indeed finds him standing by the tree. Joe asks for help with his companion, lowering Sam from his back. When questioned by the Holy Father, Joe admits responsibility for what happened. May suddenly rushes to him, worried about his condition. Joe reassures her that he is fine, though his companion is not. May asks what Joe thinks about the mission to kill Ganchori. Joe believes reconnaissance must come first. He reveals to May that Ganchori is the very great serpent he had been protecting. She is shocked to learn they are the same being. She realizes this means Joe cannot kill Ganchori, yet he also cannot ignore the disaster unfolding. At that moment, Sam regains consciousness. He insists that Joe cannot kill Ganchori. Joe wonders why Sam suddenly changed his stance, but Sam gives no clear explanation. Joe understands that Sam speaks out of loyalty, meaning they must find another solution. However, the green-haired man states that their idea will not work, and the serpent must be eliminated. The heat and poison radiating from its body could destroy the demon realm. Normally, the agency would handle such a threat, but the intentions of higher command remain unclear. A failure that could not become a dragon is indeed a massive problem. No matter what, it has to be stopped. Joe admits that it seems he must take responsibility for Ganchori and asks the girls if he can rely on them. They assure him that he can. After all, they are a team. Sam is shocked by how easily Joe appears ready to abandon his pet, questioning whether it truly mattered to him. He wonders if Joe actually intends to kill it. Clenching his teeth, he bursts out in raw fury, unable to accept what they are about to do. The man starts running away, and Joe barely manages to call out after him. The boy can only watch his fleeing friend with a heavy, hollow look. Stepping away from the sacred tree, he dives angrily into a storm of thoughts. It gnaws at him that the green-haired man dared to call the great serpent a failure. Memories of childhood resurface, when his father used to beat him while branding him the same way. Back then, people often said it was shameful to have a son like him. He never talked back, only stared silently at his parent. The problem was never that he failed to achieve something, but that he could not become the perfect son his parents demanded. To them, anything short of perfection meant total failure. That pressure pushed him into constant fights, losing control of himself again and again. Maybe that is why he grew so deeply attached to the great serpent. Somewhere inside, he believed Joe had to be different from everyone else. While Joe carried Sam on his back, they exchanged a short, heavy conversation, with Sam questioning why he was being saved despite not deserving it. Joe answered that Sam was not the person he believed himself to be. Hearing those words felt like a massive weight lifting from his chest. He fully understands that the great serpent cannot be allowed to destroy the demon realm, yet he still wants that giant to live. Meanwhile, Joe explains to his group about the key he received from the boss. They realize the hero can lend them weapons if needed. Still, Joe has no intention of killing Ganchori, as he plans to take responsibility for it instead. Joe shares a rough plan with the group. They decide it is worth trying, and the girls suggest asking others not to attack Ganchori. Joe cannot even imagine who would dare challenge such a monster, especially with the mission ending in just one more day. Suddenly, the girls remind him about Mike, nearly the only one eager to fight. They ask the Holy Father how he reacted to the announcement, and he admits the news about Ganchori deeply unsettled him. Joe wonders where that guy is right now. At that moment, Mike is pestering a random group of men. He asks where they are headed, and they answer that they are running back to the lobby. They explain that they only need to survive one more day to clear the task, so risking everything makes no sense. The group starts circling him, urging him to fight the monster instead. Suddenly, he grabs a serpent slithering past and crushes its neck without hesitation. It looks like the serpent is dead. Rubbing his hands together, Mike tells the man not to act foolish. He then turns his attention to the rest of the group, making it clear this applies to them too. The entire group grows tense and shaken. Mike suddenly launches an attack, slaughtering every serpent belonging to the group. One of the men protests that this is unfair, pointing out that Mike kills everyone else's serpents but spares his own. Mike immediately kills his own serpent as well, proving he truly does not care. Dropping the lifeless body to the ground, he receives a message stating that the hero failed to protect the serpent. He asks if that makes the man feel any better now. He then leaves, declaring his intent to kill Ganchori and suggesting they do it together. Sometime later, a large crowd approaches Joe, and Mike announces they are heading out to fight Ganchori. Joe wonders why so many people are with him, and Mike replies that everyone here is his army, backing the protagonist. He is also convinced that Joe already has a plan. People from the group beg Joe to say no, not wanting to be dragged into a deadly battle. After some thought, Joe admits he does have a plan, and that he might need Mike's help. At that moment, a group of masked figures emerges from a portal. They question what the leadership is thinking, since the students could easily be sent to their deaths. Suddenly, the boss notices the princess standing nearby, who informs him that the hero is late. Several other overseers are present as well. At that moment, they notice that someone is actually fighting Ganchori. It turns out several people are involved, Joe among them, along with fighters from the second zone. The bosses are stunned that anyone dared to challenge such an overwhelming monster, fully convinced that no one could handle it. The princess, however, hopes the attackers will give up sooner rather than later. She promises that if Joe loses, she will transfer him to the first zone. She is desperate to learn where such a powerful, awakened individual came from. Deep down, she envies the second group. Meanwhile, a real, full-blown battle unfolds around Ganchori. The twins support the hero, helping him wear the beast down. Suddenly, the half-dragon begins preparing a massive attack. He unleashes blazing fire at his enemies, but the Holy Father manages to shield them by activating a protective barrier. While the beast is distracted, Gel attacks from the opposite side. She draws Ganchori's attention, dealing only minor damage. The monster temporarily shifts its focus to her, yet even then, it fails to strike her, as Joe's Killin shields her. Those watching the fight are in shock, noticing that every attack somehow misses or deals very little damage to the serpent. Ganchori once again begins charging another attack. Suddenly, he freezes in place. It seems his flames have run dry, and seeing this, the group that had been waiting in ambush finally charges in. But as they move closer, they feel the intense heat radiating from the monster. Realizing the heat and poison will devastate them, they send warriors with high resistance to fire and toxins to the front line. Someone activates an ice wall summoning ability, encasing Ganchori within towering crystalline ice. Mei calls on those with water abilities to suppress Ganchori's flames, taking charge of holding him back. They begin dousing the dragon with water, preventing the fire from spreading uncontrollably. To restrain such a monster, others activate monster strength and physical support abilities. They are on the verge of victory, with only a little more needed to bring him down. Suddenly, Ganchori goes berserk, desperately trying to break free from the icy prison. The group has no more room to push, as the plan was to knock him off the cliff. At that moment, Mike enters the battle, ordering everyone to fall in behind him. The young fighter activates a disintegration ability, shattering the ground beneath the monster and finally sending it crashing down. The observing group is stunned, realizing at last where Joe had been all this time. He had been lying in wait and is now perched atop the dragon's head. The hero searches for a sunken spot at the center of the beast's skull. Suddenly he finds it and drives his sword straight into that point. The watching group rejoices, fully believing the heroes will succeed. Not everyone shares that joy, however, as the princess of the third group had hoped to claim Joe if he failed the mission. After losing valuable students from the first zone, she needs talent from elsewhere. If Ganchori falls, all of that becomes meaningless, and she even begins considering sabotaging the fighters so they would lose. Suddenly, her attention is drawn to the overseer of the second group, who is clearly stunned by what is unfolding on the screen. At that very moment, Joe pierces the hollow point on Ganchori's head. Time shifts back to the moment when Joe explained his plan to Mike. It turns out Ganchori was slowly losing his sanity and had already forgotten the hero's face. Joe struck a specific point on Ganchori's head, giving the beast a chance to remember him. The hero begins addressing the caustic serpent. The creature suddenly peers closely at the figure sitting atop its head. It seems to recognize its owner as Ganchori slowly lowers his head toward the ground. Joe checks whether the beast recognizes him. He also checks whether it remembers the red cloth he once tied around it. The watching group is stunned, as from their perspective, the hero appears cruel, since not everyone could tame a beast only to seemingly kill it afterward. Yet not everyone agrees with that judgment, and the princess grows thoughtful, sensing that things are far more complicated than they appear. She asks the rest of the overseers to handle Ganchori on their own and file the report claiming the students never stood a chance. Some react with outrage to that request. The director of the second zone states that the territory is under his control, so the call should be his. The girl replies that she never heard such authority from the director and adds that Joe seems to be in danger. She unleashes a lightning strike across the field, not caring who gets caught in the blast. Joe is saved by the lightning sword embedded in Ganchori's head, which absorbs the hit. The second zone overseer rushes toward her, realizing she could have injured the students. She does not understand the accusations, since Joe is still alive. In her mind, if he dies, everything collapses, so she moves in closer. Activating airwalking, she flies toward the hero and strikes Ganchori with lightning once more. This time, the shot looks perfectly aimed. The other overseers rush in, knowing she will not walk away if anything happens to Joe. Despite all the attacks, the hero brings Ganchori fully under control, and the creature offers no resistance. Joe himself is far from pleased with this kind of interference from the higher-ups. The girl realizes her lightning did nothing and guesses the hero wields a weapon that attracts lightning. The three descend toward Joe. She apologizes, admitting she tried to help but only made things worse. She is relieved the attacks missed the hero, though Ganchori's internal injuries are severe. The princess intends to return the lightning sword and deal with the beast, but the hero cuts her off, making it clear that no one but him may touch Ganchori. He never intended to kill the creature, and this revelation shocks the group. He makes it clear that he will not allow anyone else to do so either. Extending his hand, the hero declares Ganchori to be his dragon. The overseers clearly dislike this development. The poison and flames the dragon emits still pose a threat to the world. Joe openly disagrees, igniting anger among the instructors. The hero promises that he will truly take responsibility for the creature. Using Lini, Joe begins healing Ganchori's wounds. A faint green glow ignites above the beast. In an instant, the light completely envelops Ganchori. The blinding radiance forces all observers to shield their eyes. Holding the creature close, the hero affirms that it is neither a mistake nor a monster. He calls Ganchori a dragon, as if trying to awaken its true self. Suddenly, a purification of regret begins within Ganchori. The creature rapidly shrinks, becoming small enough to rest in the hero's arms. Now stabilized, there is no longer any reason to destroy it. The overseers watch in shock, realizing the Killin is capable of such a feat. After a closer look, one of them concludes that it truly is a dragon. Messages begin arriving for all participants, announcing the mission's completion. The group moves joyfully toward the exit of the level. Joe asks the seniors whether he may take the dragon with him. They reply that he may act as he sees fit, as long as he takes care of himself. The hero expresses gratitude for their kindness, though his body shows clear signs of the brutal battle. The princess voices concern that leaving him like this could get him killed. She asks a red-haired girl nearby to heal Joe. Extremely expensive medicine is used, reserved only for dire emergencies. Green paste is applied to the hero's wounds. Within seconds, every injury vanishes without a trace. Joe gestures to Sam, indicating it is now his turn to be treated, while Sam watches in silent disbelief. Pushing his doubts aside, Sam finally refers to the creature in Joe's arms as a dragon, not a snake. The two exchange a long look. After that, Sam decides he will no longer hunt serpents. Sam is already lost, so the outcome is sealed. Joe decides they should talk somewhere else and motions Sam to follow. Sam hesitates, asking what the hero wants, but Joe turns back, showing he had no hidden agenda. He starts walking away. Sam does not rush after him and instead calls Joe over to his side. After a while, both heroes stand in a clearing far from prying eyes. Joe tells Sam something so unreal that Sam struggles to believe it could even be possible. The hero answers with a firm nod. Joe adds that if Sam does not want this, he will not push him. Sam responds that he will do exactly as asked. He states that he wants to work alongside the hero. The fates of Sam and Joe intertwine, and Joe's destiny begins to stabilize. Joe's fate class rises to secondary human rank. In the middle of the night, the hero jolts awake, his chest feeling crushed as if by sleep paralysis. He thought he was used to nightmares, yet this time he can move. Suddenly he notices his Killin sitting right on his chest. Joe exhales in relief, though the creature is heavy enough to cause real pressure. Grabbing it by the sides, he lifts it up, urging it to back off, while the Qilin activates purification. Joe does not understand why she is using the skill on him. Turning his head, he realizes it is already the evening of the next day. Somehow he blacked out for nearly a full day. The Qilin lifts his shirt, reminding him of the leftover poison she is cleansing. Joe thanks his savior, gently patting her head. He must have been utterly exhausted to sleep that long. Suddenly, something rustles beneath the bed. The hero looks down. A small dragon snarls at him from below, forgotten for an entire day. Joe cannot understand how it got here, since he sent it back to the spirit realm after it tried to bite Mike. Picking it up, the hero urges it to behave, yet has no idea what to name the new creature. Suddenly, its stomach growls, making it clear the dragon is starving. Joe decides that feeding the dragon comes first. Time shifts to the cafeteria. Seeing his new pet, the hero realizes his food expenses just doubled. Mike suddenly appears behind him out of nowhere, clearly searching for his companion. He notices the new pet and asks about its name, learning it is called Yearn. Mike is surprised, thinking that name sounded more fitting for a snake. Suddenly he notices the dragon glaring at him with hostility. Mike remarks that, when you think about it, there is something more to this dragon. Joe silently watches him. He is right. Yearn is not just some ordinary dragon hatchling. During his talk with Sam, Joe mentioned that he would move together with him to the second zone. There is a reason Annabee attached herself to the second zone, where the students failed to protect the serpents. Even after failure, a second chance exists if one transfers to another zone. but that means starting from scratch, which is no easy task. Mike asks why Joe pulled Sam into the second zone. Joe replies that Sam looks useful, while Mike counters that many zones have similar students. Joe wonders whether Sam will become someone impressive in the future, sensing that Mike still believes Joe is from the future. In the Serpent Chamber, Joe looked like the true protagonist, which pushed Mike into quiet reflection. He feels like something is missing, as if the puzzle in his head refuses to come together. Joe cannot tell what is missing. In his own recklessness, he has already done far more than expected. Mike begins to say that helping the hero makes him feel more fulfilled. He does not finish, as May appears in the doorway. The girl silently observes the scene. Mike decides to leave, admitting he already took too long a break and needs to get back to work. Watching him walk away, Joe thinks the kid is at the peak of writing his own legend. May approaches him and explains that because of Mike, a lot of people failed the mission. Joe reassures her that there is no need to worry, saying Mike is not a bad person. At that moment, Sam appears at the cafeteria entrance. The hero wonders if they were talking about him. The pair get introduced to each other. A few seconds later, an awkward silence settles in. May says she should get back to her duties. Sam asks if she is Joe's girl, but Joe denies it and shows annoyance at being called an old man. Sam replies that he called his friend that only because Joe is older. Truth is, he just does not want to trip over Joe's name every time. Suddenly, Sam admits it feels like they have known each other forever. Joe reminds him of a guy Sam clashed with not long ago. He felt the same about May, sensing they were bound to work together someday. Those words unsettle Joe, since Sam talks as if he knows or remembers something from a past life. Sam cuts himself off, calling his thoughts stupid, and says he hopes they become solid partners later on. Joe starts wondering whether it is just coincidence that his friend has such thoughts, or maybe Joe himself is steering the future the way he wants. Saying goodbye to May, he senses Sam might be avoiding her. Sam says he wants to grow closer not only to May, but to the other fighters too. Everyone except Mike. Mike wiped out every snake in the area, leaving zero chance of victory. Sam cannot understand how someone can kill a serpent they were supposed to protect. Joe asks him not to provoke Mike, since things could spiral fast. He also remembers the kid is the same age as Bomb or Gel, so it should all smooth out. Suddenly, Sam says he has a small proposal for the hero. Time jumps forward a bit as a strange fight breaks out. Dodging attacks, Sam smashes a door open and dives into a passage. The hero, moving at full speed, accidentally crashes through a wall. It turns out Bomb decided to attack him. The girl refuses to accept the kid into the team. Sam does not even know who she is, since Joe brought him here. The girl declares herself the master's first disciple, calling Joe her master. She adds that her guardian angel dislikes Sam, judging him as shameless and lacking conscience. She clearly heard him proposing to bring a new member into the team. Sam stands there in silence, listening to her monologue. He too carries the power of a deity. Sam laughs at her, mocking why her god failed to recruit Joe earlier and why she is mad at him for not convincing Joe. The girl replies that Joe would not care anyway, but Sam refuses to back down. Bomb asks whether Sam understands his situation, saying they tolerate him only because they think he would not survive a fight with them. Suddenly, Gel jumps into the argument, claiming she is actually the #1 disciple, which infuriates Bomb. Bomb thinks the hero is weak for crawling into their zone after failing his mission. Sam asks if the girls want to start a massacre, since at first glance they look pretty fragile to him. Suddenly, a familiar voice echoes from behind. Joe arrives just in time, clearly sensing that things already went south. It turns out yesterday's calm shattered because Sam kept talking about divine patronage. Suddenly, Gel says their deity ordered Sam to be forced to his knees, which pushes Joe over the edge. He asks whether Zeus still wants him, and the girls nod without hesitation. Sam also confirms that his own god wants to claim Joe as well. The hero pauses for a brief moment. He agrees to accept patronage, but only from the side that comes out on top. However, they will be the ones paying the price with him. If Joe wins, they must drop this whole scheme. He also sets a condition that their gods pay him instead. Joe could really use an item at least of phantom class. The group starts chewing on the hero's words. Under divine patronage, one can borrow godly power, but must obey divine revelations. Yet not every order is a revelation. Blindly following gods without thinking turns people into puppets. Joe has zero intention of risking himself like that. Sam suddenly says the gods warn him the fight will be unfair, since Joe is way too strong. Joe agrees not to use any abilities. If they manage to land even one hit, the win goes to them. The fighters decide not to stall things. After a short warm-up, the fight kicks off immediately. Jel cockily wonders if the battle will end way too fast. She does not finish the thought before Joe's strike slams into her. There is no time left for thinking about him. Joe had warned them he was dead serious when he offered this fight. With a single blow, he knocks the girl out cold. Bomb stares at the scene in pure confusion. Lifting Jel slightly off the ground, the hero urges her to give up. Suddenly, Sam dives in with an aerial attack. The strike misses cleanly as Joe casually dodges it. Dropping the sisters aside, he switches focus to the guy. Sam starts mocking his opponent, claiming Joe completely forgot about him. Yet not a single attack reaches Joe, forcing Sam into non-stop dodging. The guy keeps laughing, wondering if that is really all Joe can do. Joe just watches him in silence, calm and condescending. Out of nowhere, a bullet whizzes past Sam's side. Bomb joins the fight, but for some reason keeps missing her shots. Using Sam's distraction, Joe grabs his head and slams him hard into the wall. Jel protests loudly at her sister, saying she cannot just hand them the loss. Having dealt with one opponent, Joe turns back to the girls. Their attack still cannot even touch him. A silent crowd watches from the sidelines, May visible among them. Someone asks her if she plans to stop what is happening. On the battlefield, furious clashes break out between the fighters. Still, no one manages to land a single wound on the hero. Watching this training-like beatdown, May only sighs with a faint smile. She takes out her phone and quietly walks away amid the students' shouts. Answering the call, she calmly says she will pass along an address. After a while, Joe stands leaning on his katana, staring at the beaten students. It looks finished. He sees no point in continuing the fight. The others, however, refuse to end it. Sam, lying on the ground, still tries to move. Joe asks the fallen fighter whether he plans to bother him again for an entire week. He is ready to keep fighting, but battling over divine whims disgusts him. Maybe things would have been better if they had admitted early they could not get along, instead of pretending everything was fine and letting gods pit them against each other. Joe truly hates how this turned out. Jel tries to push back against the hero one more time. Joe cuts her off, asking if she would kill Bomb if a god ordered it. They need to learn how to make decisions on their own. Blind obedience to gods can only end in disaster. Sam silently drops to one knee, his will to keep fighting clearly gone. The girls also acknowledge their defeat. They apologize to their comrade for attacking him without warning. He also apologizes for the sharp words from earlier. At the end of the day, Sam is a solid fighter. Sam, clearly embarrassed, squeezes out that he was no saint himself either. Their awkward honesty gets cut short when the Holy Father suddenly bursts into the room. He moves in to patch up the fighters. Joe leaves the training hall with a quiet whistle and a relaxed smile. Behind him, the hall fills with loud debates and breakdowns of the fight. At first, they were beating on each other, but in the end, they stood together against a common threat. Joe feels good knowing he managed to bring the crew a little closer. Suddenly, a familiar voice calls out, wondering if Joe planned to reconcile them from the very start. May stands by the passage, saying that real comrades are forged in battle. She explains that she called the Holy Father because she thought the fighters had seriously fallen out. Joe asks whether it feels awkward for her to be around Sam. She denies it, claiming everything is fine. Still, a strange feeling lingers. as if they have known each other for a long time. Joe grows uneasy. This is not the first time someone has said that to him. First, Sam voiced the same feeling in the cafeteria. Now May echoes it. Joe hides his emotions, smiles it off, and advises her to go easier on Sam. Elsewhere, a red-haired girl in a mask reports to a supervisor that students who failed the trial have restarted from the first zone. The princess replies that she does not have high hopes for the new batch. Joe cleared the trial with ease, and Sam also stands out, having advanced to the second zone. Anabi asks whether the princess is already giving up on Joe. The answer is no. If anything, she wants him even more now. There is another promising trainee in the second zone, but she does not finish the thought as a message arrives. The princess is surprised by how fast the response comes. The mysterious individual has agreed to the offer. The girl laughs softly at how things turned out. Sometime later, Anabi removes the seals from the seventh gate, opening it at last. Once the heroes clear the seventh demon realm, they will be able to leave the walls. This is the final room. It will be brutal, and there is no exit until the purge is complete. Slightly anxious, Anabi hopes everyone makes it out alive. People gradually begin stepping into the portal. Joe's group is incomplete. The Holy Father and May are missing. May said she wanted to check something before entering. The Holy Father is probably still busy writing his novel. Suddenly, Joe himself descends from the upper floors. His teammates urge him on. The gate is already open. He says he will join later. There is prep work to handle first. Joe keeps his plans to himself, brushing it off as a secret. The girls ask whether they should wait for him. He tells them to go ahead without him. He will catch up in no time. Today, Joe seems unusually kind, likely happy that he will finally leave this place behind. Yet when he turns away, the smile fades, replaced by a serious expression. At the end of the corridor, a shadow shaped like a human figure appears. Joe smiles quietly. Drawing closer, he sees May. She is clearly glad to see him too. She wonders if she can join the group since Joe himself did not enter the portal. He sends her ahead, saying he still has something to take care of. May blocks his path with her hand. The smile disappears from her face. She starts speaking, pointing out that she still does not even have his contact number. She has already exchanged contacts with everyone else, so May asks him for his number as well. Joe starts to extend his hand, then stops himself at the last second. The girl questions whether he really does not want to share his contact, whether he truly does not want to see her after the escape. Joe stays silent, his hand clenched tight. May, on the edge of hysteria, wonders if this is why he kept his distance all this time. Exactly for this reason, the hero never allowed himself to get closer to her. It was the only way to protect them from the dangers of the coming day of judgment. May interrupts his spiral of thoughts. Joe takes her phone, but she doubts whether he might enter a fake number. He smiles and reassures her the phone is real, yet May keeps a wary look. In the end, she decides to trust him. As they part ways, Joe gives a suspicious smile, as if the number might not have been real after all. During training with the pets, the dragon reveals new abilities, while the Killin shows off metal control through its magnetic horns. After 4 days of intense training, both pets are completely drained. Lying on the ground to rest, Joe reflects on the need to head into the demon realm. Unexpectedly, he receives a long-awaited gift from a god, dragon rank items. His peace is broken by Anabi, who asks when he plans to enter the portal, since 4 days have already passed. Joe replies that he has no plans yet and tries to find out whether the others are finished, but the girl refuses to share any information. Joe exhales, knowing full well that nothing useful would come from her anyway. That means he will have to check things himself. Still, he plans to head out only after a short training session with the beasts. For now, he wants some rest. Joe moves to the lounge and scrolls through the news. Usually, once people leave the training center, chaos follows. Yet now, 4 days after the start, everything remains eerily quiet. Could it be that no one has finished the purge yet? Joe can only enter after May exits. Suddenly, an arrow flies right past his head and embeds itself in the wall. Joe stares in shock at the golden object. It is a messenger of space and time, appearing out of nowhere with no clear reason why. The hero opens the message to see who the sender is. He freezes in terror. The message contains a photo of a wounded May. Joe presses his hand against the screen, refusing to believe what he sees. Could it be that he has once again become the reason a companion might die? His past life flashes before his eyes. The moment when May approached him and said she liked him. Joe had looked at her with disbelief, wondering why she thought that. She had answered that he still had much to learn about using his fate-stealing ability. The hero said nothing. She continued, saying she liked that he never chose the easy road, even when a far simpler path existed. Joe only smiled back. He did not avoid using his ability by choice, but because he could not. Maybe she even wanted him to pay for her injured eye. After entering the phone number, the hero returns her phone, indicating he will call once he is done. As Joe walks away, a suspicious grin crosses his face, as if wondering whether he really looks like someone who falls for appearances alone. Yet after some time, he still enters the room with the girl. The heroes are fitted with a special band made of severed skeletons. Reading the item description, Joe is horrified. After 7 days, the blades on the chains will straighten and sever whatever they are attached to. He urges the girl to hurry, but she remains surprisingly calm. He has only a band on his little finger, while the girl has one wrapped around her arm. She believes that the less karma the hero has, the better. That must mean Joe is a good person. She wants to become just like him. May dreams of breaking free from choice itself, living without chains to fate. Joe starts wondering whether the girl is being honest with him. He quickly pulls himself together, realizing how reckless it would be to fall for such a move. Could he really be getting deceived again? Suddenly, May notices a strange noise. The girl rushes toward the hero. Behind him, a group of shadows appears, attacking a hero who sees nothing. She grabs Joe by the arm and forcefully shoves him aside. In return, the girl is stabbed in the stomach by a blade. She is only lightly wounded, yet she has no intention of going down easily. She would have been faster if she had known they were not chasing the hero through other rooms. Suddenly, Joe tells her that the fate notification windows he usually sees never appeared. May does not understand what he is getting at. It seems he misunderstood her. Joe could have helped her greatly by explaining monster abilities. The hero snaps, overwhelmed by frustration. What help could he even offer when May keeps getting hurt because of him? In the Sword Forest room, she lost her eye while protecting him. Joe calls her far better than himself, unable to grasp why girls like her stay close to someone like him. She is visibly shaken by his words. Still, she smiles, ready to explain why she stays with him. Suddenly, Joe is snapped out of his thoughts when the dragon lightly bites his arm. It seems the hero has been frozen in front of a message for too long. Both of his beasts are strangely agitated. Joe steels himself, knowing he has to save the girl. Then he abruptly stops. Did he forget why he stayed behind? If he rushes after her, he might put her in even greater danger. Because of his fate, those around him keep getting dragged into disaster. May is strong. She once said she enjoys fighting against the pull of his destiny. Those words had completely stunned him, so he finally decides to enter the room of fused skeletons. Right at the entrance, several gods are waiting for him. Joe asks whether they know where May went. They do not see why they should tell him anything. They set a condition. If the hero acknowledges one of them as his god, they might talk. Joe hesitates. The same bracelets appear on his neck, wrists, and ankles. Despite the unsettling number of restraints, the hero remains calm. Zipping up his jacket, Joe decides to move on, asking the gods once more if they know where the girl is. They laugh at him, saying she could be in any of the 4 directions. So the hero chooses to search for her on his own. Joe sets off, combing through every room in his path. Reaching another hall, he comes across a pool of dried blood. It looks like a desperate battle took place here. On the floor, he finds a cross. It must have belonged to the Holy Father. In another room, several arrows are lodged in the wall. Gel must have been here. Joe moves from room to room, searching for new traces. Suddenly, a small temple rises directly in front of him. The gods warn him of danger. No battle has happened here yet, meaning the enemies are still alive. Joe notices doors scattered everywhere. It seems every single one must be checked. On the floor, he spots a strange cross-shaped mark. It could not have appeared here naturally. Perhaps the mark means the group did not go this way. Looking closer, the hero notices the same marks carved into every door. It hits him that he might have misread the signs and come the wrong way. The gods suggest May could have deceived him and lured him into a trap, but no one listens. Joe climbs to the top of the small pyramid, straight toward the throne. For some reason, he starts climbing directly onto the throne itself. A red circle glows on the ceiling above. It feels like the correct route has been found. Crawling out onto the roof, Joe scans the surroundings. The new area looks chaotic, everything scattered like after a raid. Suddenly, Joe senses a sinister energy creeping in. Drawing his katana, he signals his beast to prep for combat. Demons begin closing in. They surround him from all sides, cutting off escape, but running never crosses his mind. While Joe handles one flank, his loyal pets lock down the others. The training paid off, letting them play a real role in the mission. Suddenly, Joe spots Bomb. She appears in demon form, fighting against him. Joe pushes away dark thoughts, labeling her only a demonic shadow. Activating perfect accuracy, he charges in. Out of nowhere, her bullet flips mid-air, spinning a full 180 back at him. He cannot dodge in time as the attack locks onto its target no matter what. Another figure forms beside Bomb, the shadow of Gel. Joe hates facing them like this. He strains to dodge bullets and arrows swirling around him, boxing him in. In the fused skeleton's room, only one monster type exists. Shadows that copy forms and skills of intruders. They cannot replicate personality or conviction. Joe realizes the real Gel would never fire arrows this wildly. He rushes her, weaving through the projectiles. Several arrows cut into him, but even pain brings opportunity. With a single strike, he destroys the demon. As the shadow fades, the arrows freeze and vanish with it. Only one opponent remains. The shadow activates firing squad mode, summoning a dozen weapons aimed at Joe. Joe briefly wonders if Bomb gained a new skill. The blade cannot reach, distance blocks evasion, stealth is useless. A sudden gunshot echoes and the shadow begins to dissolve. Through a hole in the wall, Bomb and Sim come into view. They signal him to climb up. Sim helps Joe up, checking his wounds. Joe is cut in the side but insists it is nothing serious. He surveys the new location. Bomb guesses. The next room is a prison. The word prison brings May's silhouette back to Joe's mind. The group heads there and indeed finds a prison. Peering into a cell, Joe freezes in horror. May lies unconscious on the floor, badly beaten. Without hesitation, Joe breaks into the cell. Up close, her injuries look even worse. Bomb points out that Joe must understand by now that the monsters copy people. They dealt with the first wave, but new ones appeared after the sound of drums. By the second day, they learned that the original's physical condition affects the shadow. During the clash, Gel was wounded. Sim rushed in to save her. He stopped short when he noticed the shadow copy clutching its shoulder in the same spot. Joe realizes the truth. May's wounds were not caused by monsters. She inflicted them on herself. To protect the others, the girl deliberately took away her own ability to move. Bomb confirms the suspicion, explaining that May called it the only possible solution. She adds that May did this after promising to look after everyone once they were gone. Bomb begs Joe to stop May, calling her far too kind for her own good. Joe sees it differently and calls it straight-up madness. To him, actions like that scream an unstable state of mind. Bomb keeps pushing, saying they should never have left May and should have searched for another way. Joe cannot believe that an ordinary person could stop someone who had already gone off the rails. He places a hand on Bomb's head. He asks whether she found her memorial plaque. She nods, but the others still have not found theirs. Before she can finish, Bomb notices May. Joe asks to be left alone with her. He wants to talk to the girl face to face. May's wounds slowly begin to close. Suddenly, she opens her eyes. Fear flashes across her face. Whether from surprise or something deeper is unclear. Joe tries to engage her, but May cannot grasp what he is doing. She demands that the medicine be taken away. In a sudden move, she snatches the katana and drives it into her own leg. With a crazed expression, she insists that healing herself would put others in danger. Joe stops her, accidentally shattering the vial in the process. He presses hard, insisting they talk this through. Mai stares at him with wild eyes, as if she barely recognizes him. She urges him to let go of the katana. Joe refuses, knowing there is still time before the next drumbeat. Mai hesitates, lost in thought. She finally listens to him and lets the sword fall. She reproaches him for promising not to come to the battlefield, while Joe counters that being late does not mean staying away. Mai struggles to endure the pain, barely holding herself together. Joe insists that she could have beaten the shadow herself. She does not believe in her own strength and hopes he will explain everything through the window of fate. Joe activates the fate detector. Terror hits him instantly. Mai's fate window has changed drastically. She has gained the abilities of bloodlust and heavy karma. In Joe's previous life, those powers manifested much later. Their early appearance reminds him of his own theft of fate, along with an invisible killing impulse where the more the skill is used, the stronger it becomes. Yet now, Mai has far fewer bindings and fused skeletons than she did in the previous life, which means she has not been using those abilities. On the other hand, her shadow has no reason to hold back from using them in combat. Joe realizes that every time her shadow appears, it grows several times stronger. He understands that a monster freely wielding bloodlust would become a serious threat. Seeing Joe deep in thought, Mai asks him to leave her behind and take the others away. Joe wonders what would happen to her then, but she answers that it no longer matters. Joe urges Mai to focus and look straight at him. The thought hits hard that she might really die in a place like this. She is already bleeding badly, and the weight of sleep starts dragging her down. Right before losing consciousness, she makes it clear that she will leave the building only after the others are gone. Joe decides to leave the girl there for now. On the way, he runs into the group: Jel, the Holy Father, and Mike. The priest is genuinely relieved that the hero has finally rejoined them. Joe explains that he tracked them down thanks to the lost cross. The father gives thanks for its return, having already resigned himself to never seeing it again. What pleases him even more is the fact that they are all together once again. The priest admits he was worried while everyone was split up, yet fate still brought them back together despite the different rooms. Joe asks whether the priest did not come in with Sam. The priest found no one. Had they known that entering at different times changed the spawn point, they would have waited. The Holy Father wants to check on Mai's condition. Joe stops him, explaining that she fell asleep after taking the medicine. The group is surprised that Joe managed to see her at all. Bomb is confident they will meet again soon, now that Joe is with them. Sem realizes that if Joe's shadow appears on the battlefield, things will get rough. Shadows can keep fighting until they surpass the original, just like what happened with Mai. When asked about dependence on abilities, Joe cannot give an answer, as Mike keeps cutting in. Pointing at Joe's neck, Mike openly admires the bracelet. The girls notice it too, and Bomb voices concern about how lethal it might be. Joe calms everyone down and urges them to move forward quickly, even though the day has just begun. Although he suggests taking a break, Jel notices his wound and decides to leave him behind to guard Mai. As the group prepares to leave, Joe tries to stop them to sync maps, but the door slams shut. Left alone with Mike, Joe asks why they chose this room and why Mai was left alone in a prison. Mike explains that Mai herself chose a place without plants to weaken her shadow. Joe agrees with the logic, but is furious at the cruelty of leaving her to die in the cold. Asked about the arrow message, Mike is pleased that Joe figured out who sent it. With a grin, he admits the group could not move on without their main hero, especially since Joe avoided the tunnel for 4 days straight. Joe looks away, admitting that thanks to Mike, he learned about the danger threatening May. Mike then wonders how a trainee got hold of a space-time messenger. Mike calls it a secret, though he is willing to explain. Joe cuts him off, saying he does not need that information. Mike insists that some things reached him anyway, but Joe refuses again. Mike leans back, realizing the hero never imagined how things would turn out. Joe interrupts him once more. Mike fires back, hinting at whether Joe really wants to lose body parts. He wonders out loud just how much mana Joe has stacked up. An awkward silence settles between them. Joe asks him to repeat that. Mike explains that the placement of the bindings depends on one's actions. The worse the deeds, the more dangerous the zones. He points to the shackles on his own hands. The heavier the karma, the stronger the will required to endure it. Joe still does not see the point. Mike laughs, admitting he is just messing around. He finds it hilarious that Joe did bad things while pretending to be a good guy. Mike sits down, clearly curious about what will happen next. He wants to know what kind of chaos Joe caused in his previous life, who he truly is beneath it all. Without hesitation, Joe states that he is a criminal. Mike only smirks back, finding it hard to believe anyone would take that seriously. He admits he would love to meet Joe's shadow, convinced it must be insanely powerful. In response to the demand for silence, Joe got an ultimatum. The other guy would shut up only after hearing a truly interesting story. The expectation was a tale about a past life or a glimpse into the future. Joe turned away in silence, repeating to himself that his true nature was nothing like what others imagined. Mike kept pushing, forcing the hero to finally touch on memories from his childhood. Meanwhile, the group of overseers watched the dungeon events unfold, clearly enjoying their access to the surveillance system. Annabee asked whether the director was personally watching Joe, receiving a calm nod in response. Suddenly, a masked fighter delivered the requested documents. He reported that every attempt to understand Joe only made him more mysterious. An overseer asked whether any compromising material on Joe had been found. The answer was disappointing. No criminal record, just an ordinary man with a painfully plain background. The only exception was losing his parents young and later being adopted by a shaman. He followed no religion and lived the normal life of a student afterward. That raised a serious question. How did someone like this pile up so much karma? The overseer doubted Annabee's theory about simple killings. Karma at that level would require hundreds, if not thousands, of victims. It was hard to imagine actions on such a scale that could explain the anomaly. An assistant wondered aloud if they were trying to recruit someone. He questioned why a karma check was even built into the trial. The overseer explained it was meant to filter out candidates with corrupted karma. That led to another obvious question. Why was this not done at the very first stage? Even accepting a trainee who turned out to be a killer put the system's efficiency in doubt. The students now had to risk everything in the final room. They needed to prove they were not criminals. Suddenly, fighters from a neighboring zone attacked Joe and Mike. The attackers demanded the execution of all strong ones who refused to fight the shadows. They stood no chance against this duo. 6 days had passed since the room of blood-stained skeletons opened. For many participants, the bracelets were painfully digging into their skin as levels rose. Some risked losing fingers, others their ears. Joe handed out syringes filled with painkillers to his comrades. The drug would kick in within minutes, letting them keep moving. Leaving the group behind, the hero went to inspect the room himself. He assigned someone to watch over the wounded and promised to return before the next signal. In the wrecked chamber, plaques were missing from their usual spots. Suddenly, something moving caught his eye. From the end of the corridor, several remaining shadows were watching him. Over the past days, escapes from such creatures had spiked sharply. Wasting strength on a cleared zone was pointless, as the enemies regenerated endlessly. Joe stepped into battle. The gods, watching the clash, were impressed by his skill. A question arose. What would his own shadow be like? That thought disturbed not only the gods. Joe himself feared such a meeting, having never once seen his own reflection. Unexpectedly, a glowing object flashed nearby. A plaque of unclear origin emitted a familiar blue light. The same glow May once carried in a past life. It turned out not to be her artifact, and the barrier vanished. Joe picked up the plaque. Clenching it in his fist, he felt no joy at all. It felt as if he had been searching for an artifact meant for someone else. Luck seemed to be mocking him, tossing useless items his way. His sharpened senses suddenly flared up, screaming that someone else was nearby. Shouts echoing from outside confirmed the bad feeling. Opening the door, the hero ran into a group of strangers. Seeing him, they let out a relieved breath, revealing themselves as members of the second squad. They had not seen the heroes for a long time, likely arriving late to the level. They offered him to join their group. Joe refused, focused on searching for May's plaque. He asked whether anyone had seen the girl. No one had encountered her or the artifact. Only one participant mentioned a plaque, but that person had already left the battlefield. Suddenly, Joe noticed May's former boyfriend among them. The guy tossed him a bundle containing a map. The artifact allowed synchronization and tracking the amulet's location. Joe asked why the group looked so worn down. It turned out they had faced an abnormally powerful shadow. The creature stood out from others and radiated raw, uncontrollable terror. Some people even started vomiting after seeing its victims. Joe began piecing things together. The travelers explained that such beings only started appearing on the fourth day. Suddenly, one guy noticed that Joe's bindings matched those seen on the shadow. He asked when Joe entered this level, but Joe only gave him a silent look. Pushing the hand away, the hero prepared to leave. However, he was stopped and asked to show his neck. Joe had no intention of moving an inch. The group could not grasp what was happening, wondering if the shadow belonged to him. There was no solid proof. Still, a guy in a Hawaiian shirt insisted the shadow was his, as the timing matched and the bindings were in the same places. Exactly like Joe's. Whispering spread through the group. Some demanded to see his neck to clear things up. Others argued that even visible bindings would not prove ownership of the shadow. The pressure continued, the group pushing harder for him to show his neck. The delay seemed suspicious, since if the shadow was not his, there should be nothing to fear. Joe remained perfectly still. Many started assuming his power fed on others. Suddenly, one participant called for silence and suggested letting Joe speak. It was claimed everything would be resolved if he just showed his neck. Instead, the hero suddenly activated invisibility. Doors flew open, drawing everyone's attention. The crowd rushed forward in pursuit. They had no intention of letting him escape easily. Yet Joe did not run. He stood by the door, and once the crowd passed, he dropped the invisibility. Thinking it through, he let out a heavy sigh. Joe had expected this kind of outcome. In his past life, people reacted the same way upon learning about his power, though the speed this time caught him off guard. The worst part was thinking about how his companions would react. Would they still accept him once the truth came out? What would May say if she learned Joe was stealing destinies? Meanwhile, he reached the camp where the others were already waiting. Joe reported the encounter with the group and shared the information about the possible location of May's plaque. Handing over the map, he motioned for everyone to follow his lead. The group emerged into a grove of giant trees. The area felt like a sealed, overgrown garden straight out of a dungeon arc. Joe urged them not to waste time searching for the plaque. Scanning such a massive zone could burn hours easily. The gods complained about how boring the task felt during the search. To them, clashing with the second group sounded way more hype. Their constant pressure got on Joe's nerves. Suddenly, someone yelled that the plaque was found, hidden inside a hollow tree. At that moment, a deep drumbeat thundered through the grove. A dark aura wrapped around the heroes like a curse field. Among the shadows flickered the silhouettes of Sam and a girl. The small number of enemies gave a bit of hope. Joe spotted May's shadow among them. The girl held a katana, a red binding glowing on her left arm. Her shadow was not standing but kneeling, unable to rise. Joe froze at the sight while the fight raged behind him. He remembered how May had hurt herself before, wondering if she was still doing it. Gripping his sword, he decided to erase her fast without hesitation. Suddenly, the girl began to heal. A notification appeared about a skill being boosted by earth energy. The healed girl unleashed the tree leaves method. The attack reached the group in an instant. Joe ordered an immediate retreat from the greenhouse zone. Barely holding off the strikes, he tried to close the distance. The odds of winning were basically non-existent. May's shadow kept attacking non-stop. Without warning, she knocked the katana from his hands. Joe told everyone to escape, pushing aside all hesitation. Suddenly, a razor-sharp leaf pierced straight into his leg. The shadow watched from the rubble, calm and cold. Sensing weakness, it moved in for the kill. The arm holding the katana rose for a finishing strike. Joe snapped his eyes open. Playing weak, he tried a counter, but the shadow leapt away. The enemy reappeared right behind him. Activating Bloodlust, the shadow's attacks surged even harder. The teammates who somehow had not fled yet rushed in to help him. Suddenly, the shadow of the Holy Father joined the girl, instantly healing all the wounded. Bomb was stunned, never expecting shadows to wield healing powers. Sam activated a magic spear to eliminate the Holy Father's shadow, but Joe stopped him, realizing the timing was already lost. The empowered shadows resumed their assault with savage fury. Parrying blows, Joe shared his thought and suggested retreat instead of fighting. He was convinced their chance of victory was close to zero. The scene shifts into a grim underground dungeon. Joe and the group end up in May's cell while the Holy Father treats their wounds. He voices concern that his own shadow is roaming the corridors. The priest considers injuring himself like May did, but Joe shuts that down immediately. Joe pushes for a fast escape, explaining that shadows only copy those who stay inside the dungeon. The twins ask about May's plaque, wondering if she would really risk going after it alone. Joe declares that he will personally wipe out May's shadow and retrieve the artifact. The girl is left confused by his words. He looms over her, locking eyes with an intense, unblinking stare. Joe suggests that May come with him. She stays silent, unable to find the right words. Trusting his strength, May instinctively reaches for the blade to wound herself again, but Joe snaps the weapon out of her hands in a flash. He reveals that he already has a carefully crafted plan, one that makes self-harm completely unnecessary. Mai is stunned, wondering if the hero truly found a way to save her, while Joe answers only with a mysterious smile. The scene shifts back to the greenhouse where the shadows fiercely guard the plaque. Suddenly, part of the shadows begin to dissolve into thin air. Bomb vanishes first, followed by Sam. In the end, only the girl's shadow remains. Joe and May appear at the threshold. The hero regrets not sending Mike toward the exit earlier, but his whereabouts are unknown. May suddenly pulls out a knife, threatening to take her own life, but Joe disarms her instantly. He begs her not to gamble with her life and holds firm faith in victory. Joe seems to read her thoughts about his possible defeat. She looks at him in silence, unable to grasp his true motives. Clutching the edges of his clothes, May whispers that she trusts him. With a faint smile, she reassures herself that the two of them have escaped worse situations together. In response, Joe's face lights up with a genuine smile. Without warning, Joe launches his attack, determined to end the fight in a flash. Activating invisibility, he strikes from concealment. The first blow lands cleanly on the girl's shadow. After the strike, Joe melts back into thin air. The second attack also hits its mark. The shadow erects a barrier of intertwined branches around itself. Joe had anticipated her use of wooden armor techniques. He instantly shifts his position. Dodging counterattacks with razor-sharp timing, the hero closes the distance. His agility reaches the 30th level. Even through the dense curtain of vegetation, Joe finds gaps to maneuver. Step by step, he moves closer to his target. The shadow watches him with an unreadable smile. Admitting that her calm unnerves him, Joe activates pyrokinesis. Summoning a fire dragon, the hero triggers a violent explosion. The creature prepares a blazing assault meant to ignite every tree in the area. Everything unfolds almost too smoothly. The shadow demon is engulfed in flames. While the dragon forms a fiery trap, Joe cuts off every escape route. Despite the shadow's nature, the fire deals real, brutal damage. The opponent is pinned between two pillars of roaring flame. Joe celebrates, convinced the shadow is finished. All that remains is to wait for the flames to free May's plaque. A sudden counterattack catches him off guard, but he barely manages to parry it. A group of mercenaries appears, announcing a bounty of 500 million on his head. Joe smirks, knowing such a massive price tag reeks of operatives from the second zone. They urge him to surrender, confident that he has no desire to fight here. They swear that this outcome will differ from their previous encounters. Joe senses a wave of bloodlust radiating from them, something completely out of character for the first zone. He suddenly freezes, recognizing one of the pursuers. Mike steps onto the battlefield. The hero cannot grasp why Mike would ever need to fight him. Joe wonders why his companion switched over to the first zone. Mike, wearing his usual radiant grin, acts like the hero could at least fake surprise. What really interests him is how Joe managed to deal with May's shadow. There were hundreds of possible routes, yet the hero chose the hardest one. Mike lunges forward as if possessed, moving in a trance. Joe watches in shock as blood spills across the ground. Mike insists that the hero is nothing like him. Even under attack, Joe does not budge an inch. Mike suddenly turns on his own allies, striking them down like a madman. He despises the idea of having two main characters in the same story. He claims it would be better if Joe were just a side fighter, maybe even some kind of double agent. It turns out the messenger of space and time was part of Mike's plan all along. After hearing him out, Joe dismisses it as nonsense, having sensed Mike's bloodlust long before he arrived. Mike smirks at the hero and claims he will take his word for it. Even if May hurt herself for the sake of the mission, he still intends to fight Joe. Joe still cannot figure out what Mike is really aiming at. Mike suddenly draws his weapon, declaring that he is on Joe's side. At that moment, the remaining enemies rush in, branding Mike a traitor. They stand no chance against the combined force of the two heroes. Suddenly, Joe hears Mike call him over. Mike has seized a helpless man by the neck and activated his decomposition ability. He tosses the drained body at Joe's feet. Joe is horrified, yet the unfortunate victim is still alive, staring in terror. Mike insists that the job must be finished if Joe wants to use his true skills. Joe is shaken, wondering how Mike could know about such abilities. Mike tells him not to fixate on trivial details. He wants to witness Joe using the fate-stealing skill. Joe refuses, determined never to use it on a living person. Suddenly, a dark aura thickens around the heroes. Another shadow appears in the distance. Mike is disappointed, having hoped for something more fun than a simple shadow fight. He does not get to finish that thought. A devastating attack crashes toward them, carrying power unlike anything they have faced before. It is Joe's own shadow. The demon strikes in a flash, blasting Mike aside. He fails to raise a guard in time. Mike is hurled away, smashing straight through a wall. Several lifeless bodies lie scattered around him. Joe is stunned by the sheer force, seeing his companion drop by a single blow. Dust and smoke from the impact slowly begin to clear. The shadow stares silently at the hero with wide crimson eyes. Joe realizes that he has finally come face to face with himself. Suddenly, the wounded Mike shouts with his last strength, urging Joe not to hesitate. How could he destroy the demon without the stolen power? Joe understands that he must steal fate before the shadow does. Joe activates the ability, ripping away every skill within range. The hero knows he has no choice but to destroy his own shadow. His power, perception, agility, endurance, and mana all spike to level 30. It actually worked. The odds of winning jump way up. Joe activates the combat instinct. His shadow cannot kill him because it is literally him. The combat instinct fires off a warning. A sudden alert screams that the enemy is overwhelmingly strong. Every move the ability calculates gets perfectly countered. It feels like the shadow has zero weak points, clean and flawless. Fear locks his joints tight. The hero cannot move. The shadow does not hesitate, raising its blade above Joe's head and striking. But at the final instant, Joe barely manages to block. The shadow activates the Shadow Thief skill, copying Joe's abilities for itself. The demon grabs Joe by the face. Dark energy spirals around him. It really is his shadow. Childhood memories flood Joe's vision. He sits in his mother's arms. His father argues with a doctor nearby, unable to understand what illness the child carries. Sometime later, the whole family rides in a car together. They pass strange totems on the road, heading toward a fortune teller. She declares that Joe will only get better once he lets a god into his heart. There seem to be no other options. The god seeking the boy is far too powerful. Young Joe wonders what that even means. His parents explain that he would become a great messenger. Accepting a god would mean living his entire life under divine commands. The child shakes his head, rejecting that fate outright. His parents hug him tightly. On the way home, the car crashes violently and flips onto its roof. The condition of his parents' bodies is horrific, while the boy remains unharmed. Even though he rejected the god, it still allowed him to live. Joe's shadow tells his younger self that these were the first people who died because of him. After that day, he clearly accumulated a massive amount of karma. The deaths of May, Sam, Bomb, and countless others rest on his shoulders. Joe does not have enough fingers to count all the victims who died because of him. First his parents, then every member of the Flying Tigers clan, and later, everyone who entered the demon realm. All of it happened because Joe rejected the god. The god, wearing Joe's face, embraces his true self and offers acceptance. If he refuses, there is still a way to save his teammates without accepting divinity. That way is simple. Die right here. The deity sends the hero into an endless fall. Only then will future karma be prevented. With his eyes closed, Joe realizes that if he dies in this twisted place, none of the Flying Tigers will perish. The god praises him for finally giving up, promising that he will truly belong here. Yet as he sinks deeper, Joe wonders if this is really how it should end after everything he has done. His clone orders him to forget the past. Joe cannot. That fateful day plays again in his mind. The faces of everyone who died before his eyes. Joe knows he must atone for his sins. The god claims that everyone is alive and well now, but May's fate remains uncertain. Those words snap something inside Joe. He tears free from the crushing weight, bursting upward like breaking water. He promised to lead the girl out of the demon realm. The deity questions why the hero keeps choosing the wrong path. All he has to do is die, to perform the single act of good he is capable of. But Joe has zero intention of dying here. First things first, he has to get May out of this place. The deity dismisses that motive as nothing more than a flimsy excuse. It insists that May does not even want him to live. And those words hit Joe like a straight gut punch. Sensing that the pressure landed perfectly, the deity keeps twisting the knife. It is convinced the girl does not even want to see him again. Maybe she even regrets ever meeting Joe at all. Joe drops to his knees, his will finally cracking. The deity steps in behind him, tightening the mental grip. Still, Joe pushes back inside his own head. Even if that is true, he has to escape no matter what. The deity warns that only pain waits beyond this place. Fine cracks begin to crawl across Joe's sword. Joe rips the blade free, screaming defiance, making it clear he does not care anymore. He will not regret returning to the outside world. Joe gave the girl his word that he would save her, and that promise alone is enough to force his hand. He raises the sword. The image of the cage where he found her flashes before his eyes, and with the next strike, he shatters the red veil. White light disperses, and Joe snaps back to reality. May is standing over him. She pulls him up from the ground. The girl is genuinely relieved that he finally came back to himself. Even the gods thought he was already done for. Joe answers with a quiet, knowing smile. The deity that claimed he was unwanted turned out to be wrong. May was waiting for him after all. Suddenly, the joy on Joe's face freezes into pure horror. The girl is missing an arm. Not hearing anything around him, Joe reaches out, needing to confirm it is not some sick illusion. Instead of a hand, his fingers close around a severed stump. May flinches in pain. Joe demands to know why she stayed behind. She could not leave him. A black shadow swallowed him, and even Mike was powerless to help. Joe asks where the guy went after that. May explains that he left the moment the time limit expired. Joe snaps at her, furious that she did not leave with him. Staying here was the worst possible decision she could have made. But May fires back just as hard, shouting that it is already too late to settle things like that. Suddenly, blood starts streaming from her nose. Losing her balance, the girl begins to collapse. Joe freezes in shock. The gods sneer at him, calling him ungrateful. May managed to seriously damage the shadow, lost consciousness, woke up again, and still kept fighting. Joe silently lifts her from the ground. Her remaining arm is badly shattered. He carries her in his arms. At least now it is finally over. Suddenly, a gigantic red entity begins to manifest behind Joe. The deity refuses to back off, promising that if Joe leaves, he will definitely die. At the same time, several shadow hounds appear in the arena. This time, Joe knows he has to kill the creature for real. The hero summons his pets. He orders them to protect May at all costs. Joe himself steps into combat. Drawing his sword, he starts deflecting the incoming attacks. The shadow tries to finish Joe using the beast creation ability. For Joe, that kind of move is nothing special. After pushing it back, he roars at the god that if he dies, the god goes down with him. There is no reply. The shadow activates regeneration. Joe is straight up shaken by this. This was absolutely not how he thought it would go. The god even stole the healing skill. What the deity cannot grasp is why Joe keeps resisting acceptance, why he keeps dragging his own karma down. Why choose actions that will never earn a pat on the head? Joe has no answer. He is too busy deflecting a massive strike crashing down from above. The girl who had been unconscious until now begs him to survive. Joe pushes his power output up by 30% and lunges forward, barely managing to block the attack. Suddenly, a notification hits him. All of his stats have risen to level 30. That means every condition for unlocking the second trait has been fulfilled. The god attempts to strike Joe once again. At that moment, several scrolls materialize in the center of the room, each bearing the image of an animal. Joe realizes that with the new Zodiac skill, his odds of winning just skyrocketed. The god's voice keeps mocking the new power as pathetic, echoing non-stop even though time itself has frozen. Joe's Zodiac sign is the rat, granting him access to a skill bound to that sign. He ignores the deity completely. His Zodiac was decided long ago. Now, at last, he has a way to fight back against the disaster dumped on his life. He acquires the skill squeal of a cornered rat. Now he can handle this. Time resumes its flow. The golden light fades away. Several hounds rush him, while the god declares that with such a skill, escape is impossible. The wolves sink their teeth into Joe. He does not even try to defend himself. Instead, a smile spreads across his face. The god cannot understand it, convinced the hero has already lost. Suddenly, Squeal of a cornered rat activates as Joe's health drops below 10%. A yellow circle erupts around him, blasting the dogs away. The new skill allows him to grow stronger the more danger closes in. A rat may be weak, but nothing is more terrifying than one pushed into a corner. Joe charges forward. The shadow barely manages to dodge the sword strike. It insists the hero will die anyway, questioning the point of fighting at all. Joe does not listen. Even at the cost of his own life, he will get May out of the dungeon. He attacks again. This time, the enemy can barely block the blow. That sends the deity into a rage. Stretching out its hand, it begins preparing another attack. It activates dragon transformation, turning into a massive violet dragon head. Joe receives a slight strength debuff. The rat fears the dragon. Even a man wielding dragon powers once stood no chance against this god and died. As it launches its assault, the deity questions what Joe ever hoped to achieve by challenging a god. Joe raises a hand to cover his face. Just now, he chose the prettiest trump card he had. Fully expecting a dragon to appear, he brought along the Blade of Generational Dominion, a weapon designed specifically to slay dragons. In a situation like this, being a rat is actually the better deal. Upon detecting a dragon, the blade massively boosts its attack power. Joe dashes in with a thrust, wounding the dragon. Suddenly, squeal of a cornered rat is cancelled. The hero collapses to the ground. Joe has won. He earns a reward for defeating an enemy stronger than himself, and his destiny class rises as well. Yet even as the entity fades away, the god's voice continues to echo from the void. Joe starts wondering if all of this is just a hallucination. Maybe this is how he dies, drained and empty. If he had known it would all end like this, he would have ended it himself long ago. Suddenly, the image of that same fortune teller appears before his eyes, signaling that it is time to return. Joe wakes up in the middle of a hospital. He jolts up from the bed, completely lost about what is happening. For a split second, May appears in the doorway. Joe rips the needles out of his body and rushes after her, yelling for her to wait. He barely makes it a few meters before collapsing to the floor, his strength still drained. He lifts his head, relieved that the girl seems fine. But instead of her, someone else is standing there, faceless, with hollow holes where eyes should be. Terror floods Joe. Why is he seeing the dead again? He has slipped back to the edge because of his karma. The story drifts into Joe's childhood. In his foster family, they start bullying him, blaming him for strange events that began the moment Joe arrived. Some even suggest dumping him on the street, while a god keeps whispering to Joe, urging him to accept it. Eventually, they bring him to a temple. As he steps inside, the voices in his head fade. The holy barrier keeps the gods out. Suddenly, an unfamiliar woman in a bright dress speaks to him, asking if he is Joe. She introduces herself as Julia. Joe watches her warily. She notices the bruises and marks on the boy's face. The family members avert their eyes in shame. Julia quietly tells Joe that his relatives asked her to perform a ritual so he would accept a god. Yet she senses he does not want that. Joe says nothing and turns away. Julia continues, explaining that if he does not want it, he does not have to accept a god. Still, the god trying to claim him is far too powerful for her to shield him directly. So she invites Joe to visit her often, to become her student and learn how to protect himself. She reaches for his hand, but the boy pulls away, afraid she might get hurt. She only smiles, clearly thinking he underestimates her. She has her own god watching over her, so there is nothing to fear. Taking Joe's hand, she says that even if it hurts now, good people will surround him later. Julia smiles, convinced the boy is destined to become happy. The story snaps back to the present. Remembering everything, Joe realizes she had started a ritual to suppress divine energy. While living with her, he stopped seeing spirits. But when karma shifts and one approaches the boundary, forbidden sights and voices begin to surface. Cross that line and death follows. Suddenly, Joe opens his eyes again. He is back in the hospital, surrounded by his beasts. A nearby nurse tells him not to move, warning that he might faint. Joe asks about May and receives reassurance that she is fine. That news lifts his spirits. The nurse congratulates him on recovering, and behind her Joe notices figures he should not be able to see are still there. The ghosts fade faster than living people, but what worries him most is the destiny window. Opening it, Joe is stunned. Somehow his level jumped twice, reaching a phantom tertiary rank. Could this be because he swapped fate with May? He also cannot understand how they even escaped the demon realm. Suddenly, someone enters the room. The administrator and his assistant come to visit, immediately asking why Joe never mentioned his ability to steal others' powers. Joe realizes he has been figured out. The silence stretches uselessly, so the administrator repeats the question. Joe smiles and admits he feared exactly this kind of reaction. Adjusting his glasses, the man says he is calm now. He then asks whether Joe has ever killed someone to steal their fate, receiving a firm denial. Joe adds that he has only ever killed in self-defense. At the start of training, they had also signed a contract accepting that serious conflicts between students could happen. Still, killing was killing, intentional or not, so Joe asks the administrator what awaits him now. He wonders if punishment is coming. Instead, the administrator suddenly congratulates Joe, noting he holds the highest score among all trainees. He also has a small proposal prepared for him. Joe is offered an official position in the second team of the Fate Protection Agency. To the administrator's surprise, Joe shows no desire to accept the offer. The man understands, thinking such a move might be too sudden for someone who just woke up from hell. He hands Joe a business card, advising rest first and contact later. He also suggests hitting the training hall after full recovery. With a bright smile, he leaves the room. Joe sinks into thought about everything that just happened. No one can be allowed to learn about his true purpose. If they do, they will force him to work for them no matter what. After getting dressed, Joe heads straight to May. Entering her ward, he sees she is still unconscious. She has not woken up at all. Her missing arm is real, not a hallucination. The sight makes Joe's vision blur. Suddenly, he detects an aura of killing within May's fate. A dark presence begins to gather around her. Joe is shaken, since in his past life May never carried such a heavy death aura. Without warning, the compass of fate bursts out of Joe's bag and activates. The compass starts spinning wildly, empowered by the barrier's force. Countless near-future timelines flood into Joe's vision, so many that his head starts to ache. In one vision, May is trapped in a strange blue space. Across from her sit a woman and several men, convinced Joe will not come and does not even know where she is. The unknown woman is confused, questioning why May is ready to die for someone who abandoned her. Joe realizes this is his vision, possibly the future itself. Suddenly, May in the vision snaps, using her last strength to protect Joe. The woman opposite her kills May without hesitation. Joe watches the vision in absolute horror. The terror of the prophecy drops him to the floor. The thought that May might die for him somewhere unknown cuts deep. Joe forces himself to stay calm. The compass alone cannot be trusted. The truth must be uncovered. Touching the compass again, he is pulled into another vision, now standing in the middle of a road. Turning his head, Joe realizes where he is. Nearby, his child self tries to pull his parents from a crashed car. They urge the boy to run for help, believing adults are nearby. His mother smiles softly, checking if he understood the task. The boy runs off to find help, asking only that they wait for him. Joe reaches out, trying to stop the vision from fleeing. But he cannot interact with memories, and the boy keeps running, calling for help. Joe notices a mark left on the boy's shoulder where he touched him, with tiny particles scattering from his hand. From the car, his parents' voices echo, wondering what will become of Joe once he is alone. Someone answers that he will be fine. A blinding explosion suddenly erupts. Joe understands they knew the car was about to explode.